Welcome back to Product Marketing Rendezvous. Having a great time so far? We can't say we're surprised. After all, it's an event quite like no other. The good news, we've plenty more magic up our sleeves that's guaranteed to blow you and your fellow PMMs off your feet. But before we serve up another slice of product marketing prowess, we want to take a moment to thank everyone who's played a part in making this event possible. Speakers, presenters, and of course you, the product marketing community. Remember, you can engage with speakers and their sessions by posting your question in the comments section or reaching them in our Slack community. Now sit back and above all, enjoy.
Hello everyone, my name is Amit Joshipura. I'm so thrilled to be part of this conference. I will be speaking on pivoting businesses, what I call a product marketing dream come true. This idea of taking an existing business, your organization, and discovering a new industry, a new stakeholder group, a new opportunity for the business to grow. So in my specific example, I will reference an employer that I was at previous to the one I'm with today. So I do currently work for Dexcom, which is a diabetes technology company, both in part and go-to-market strategy. But I will be speaking more to my experience at my company before, which was Fitbit, which I think many of you probably know. So just what's going to be this presentation, and actually let me go into presentation mode. So just a bit about who I am, a bit about Fitbit's business evolution. So how it came about that we went from a B2C to a B2B company. Who are the new stakeholders when you navigate to a different type of business opportunity? So, Fitbit became and still is one of the world's most prominent and well-known wearable companies. They were focused on health, fitness, holistic well-being through their trackers and smartwatches. And it was the brilliant idea of our general manager, Amy, to pivot into group wellness and into a B2B offering. And so we'll speak a bit about what my role was in terms of helping to grow that B2B opportunity. Where can there be overlap when you're looking at going from a B2B to, or rather B2C to B2B, or really in any case? I look at your organization and think about what are the opportunities to go maybe after a different patient group or a different user base or a user group, what have you, to decide how to grow the business. And so what was exciting for me was just to kind of usher in Fitbit through a new health opportunity that really wasn't kind of at the inception of the company. It was a whole new opportunity. And I'll go through an example of what we did to kind of map what we had created for Fitbit Health Solutions. And then, of course, provide my contact information for those that would like to reach out or connect on LinkedIn. So just really quickly about me. I do have a bachelor's in biomedical and electrical engineering from Duke, and then an MBA from University of Michigan. My work career has kind of traversed several different industries. My pre-MBA career was primarily in IT and consulting. So I did both IT consulting and general strategy consulting for two companies, Cisco and LAK Consulting. Post business school has been all in health tech, been really focused on product management and product marketing opportunities within health tech, so Medtronic, and I've spanned the cardiology, neurology, and diabetes organization, and then of course my time at Fitbit, which is now Google, as the head of product marketing, and then I'm currently sitting at a company called Dexcom, like I said, which is where I'm leading product and commercial efforts for new patient groups for the organization as it grows and tries to address more of the diabetes population. So a bit of the evolution. So, obviously Fitbit was born and bred with the two founders, Eric Friedman and James Park, both engineers who wanted to think about how to take the Nintendo Wii technology. Crazy enough, the Nintendo Wii was kind of the inspiration for Fitbit and how to make the organization something relevant for more consumers. That was back in 2017, so like almost 14 years ago. And since then has obviously traversed quite a lot to become the company it is today. So, grew over years to become one of the top trackers and wearables, to the point where they became, a IPO potential, which it hit in 2015. We had about 100 million active users, 100 million plus active users that leveraged the wearables. 2016 was when they want to become a digital healthcare company. That's where they really decided that they wanted to go from just purely a wearable tech or a fitness company or a consumer tech company to a digital healthcare company. And that was a important point because it was really the beginning of this B2B business, which is what I'll speak to, Fitbit Health Solutions. 2018, we actually launched one of our biggest B2B client partnerships with Blue Cross Blue Shield, and really entrenched ourselves into into the space of digital health therapeutics. So we went from kind of a pure holistic wellness, well-being company to actually being a meaningful health services company. So partnering with organizations, payers, to become a valued health partner to those that are part of these organizations. And that was kind of a critical turning point for Fitbit because it was no longer just a pure direct-to-consumer business. And then, of course, the most recent news of the acquisition by Google is really going to further the goals of wellness and digital health, and continue building on this B2B business. So when you think about B2B businesses, you have to realize that sometimes these are totally different customers. And that's really where I think we begin to realize that you can't just stick to one single customer or one point of view or one point of contact. So Fitbit's new stakeholders that they never had before, which, could be daunting for companies, but if you have the right marketing organization, the right PM groups, product marketing groups that are ready and able and willing to pivot towards a different type of industry, then you're ready. So I've listed some customer types that Fitbit had never talked to and needed to as we grow our B2B business. So, going to hospitals, health plans, partners, and brokers are four kind of archetypical customers that a B2B wellness company is going to go to. Stakeholders in those different channels could include program directors, plan directors, innovation managers, head of partnerships, executive administrators, chief human resource officers. These are people that Fitbit had never talked to. There was no alignment with the existing customer base. But you should never be afraid to talk to customers you've never talked to before, because you'll learn things about how you can apply your business in ways that you never thought you could before. What's also great about thinking through how to pivot from a B2C or to B2B or any kind of new pivot for your company is where can you leverage existing tools and materials and content that you have today, and what might need to be created newly. So when you're building these organizations and these new product marketing functions that are going to go after new businesses, you want to think about what can we leverage today? Well, we leveraged all of the customer journeys and mapping that Fitbit had done for the consumer basis because we're still going to be B2B2C. The plan was not to be just B2B because we make our business customers look good if we're able to show strong enrollment numbers. So, what can be leveraged? Customer journeys and mapping, sales effectiveness tools and templates. So remember that most of our B2C customer base, we still talk to retailers like Target, Best Buy, Walgreens, Walmart. Those also had sales reps. Those still had enterprise reps that were very effective at, launching big consumer deals. And so that was what we leveraged for our B2B business, because we had hired a whole new enterprise rep base for calling into B2B customers. FAQs, all the support content, because again, you're using the same technology. We still use the Fitbit devices, The core technology was the same. We weren't building new dedicated products for B2B. What we're building was dedicated population dashboards. But at the minimum, you could still leverage what FAQs, and then social media activity. Again, any consumer who learns about your product or your technology, very relevant to send it to your business clients as well. They can see the groundswell, the interest that people have in terms of leveraging your product. Things will have to change though, of course, right? If you're going into a new B2B instance or any kind of new business that your business, your organization or company is pivoting to, you have to think about, are there new value proposition decks? Because we're speaking into a new customer. So our B2B customers were much more cared about long-term health costs, preventative care, talking chronic conditions like diabetes, heart disease, COPD, lipidemia. Our B2C customers don't think about that. So how do you obviously speak to those customers, show the value, show the value add? Virtual demos, obviously customers need to see, business customers need to see the products that you're offering, the B2B offering. So virtual demos are critical. And then of course, outcome studies that you have to show why your solution, why your instance of the product is going to work for that organization. So it's critical to have those case studies. And then event strategy, of course, right? So what it took for Fitbit to start to become a name in the corporate wellness space or the well-being space was obviously going to the critical human resource conventions, going to speak to the customers who are going to learn about HR technologies and other types of products or offerings that you would normally go to if you were just a Fitbit customer. So, that's where some of the divergence happened. The last slide I'll show is kind of how we think through, a behavior-based approach. So you want to create personalized and optimized ongoing experiences for B2B end users. So this was the journey map that we had started to think about for our end customers, right? So you think about, just end users like myself, who went on Amazon or the Fitbit website to purchase the product, okay? Well, you still leverage the same kind of hierarchical theme. So activate, support, and change. Those are all pillars that we wanted to use and pull during the B2C instance. You do the same thing for B2B. So don't think that you have to essentially reinvent the wheel or create from the ground up all these new things that wouldn't be relevant in this new instance. That is not true. There is definitely opportunity to apply customer maps, customer journey touch points that would still be relevant for a B2B customer. So thank you so much for your time. I really hope that this was knowledgeable in terms of how do you not only pivot to a new business where you've never talked to those customers, but what can be leveraged, what can be repeated, and what might have to be created newly, and what it takes to be able to be a meaningful instance in a different channel, geo market, wherever that your company hasn't been before. It was a thrill of a lifetime, honestly, to be able to take Fitbit, which is a well-known loved device that people would think every fitness enthusiast would have, and how do you pivot that into more of a B2B instance. So I provided my personal email and my LinkedIn for those that would like to connect. Thank you so much and have a wonderful day. Bye-bye.
Welcome, bienvenue, g'day, ni hao, hola. Wherever you are joining us from today, we want to say a huge welcome to our global community. We hope you are enjoying Product Marketing Rendezvous. And a special thank you to all our speakers and participants who together form our spectacular international lineup. Their sessions are bursting with insights to help the product marketing community level up. And remember, have your questions at the ready because the speakers will be answering your questions and offering tailored support after their presentations. Leave your question in the comments below and get awesome advice from an expert in the field. What's not to love about that? So now let's resume the rendezvous.
Hi everyone, my name is Eric Moeller. I'm a Director of Product Marketing at Sage. Today I'm going to be talking to you about the superpower that I think every product marketer needs. Now just to quickly give away the punchline, that superpower is your ability to write great sales copy. So before we jump into the presentation, I just want to talk a little bit about the backstory here. I think it's probably about 7 or 8 years ago, I was listening to a lot of podcasts where entrepreneurs of startups would talk about the skills that they felt were really critical in helping to get their software businesses off the ground. It seemed like as I was listening to these podcasts, the thing that came up over and over again was their ability to write great sales copy. Now, as someone who'd always worked in marketing, I was thinking, I kind of get a sense of what they're talking about, sales copy, but what exactly, and why is this a superpower? What is there really that they're putting to good use? So a lot of them had recommended a bunch of different books on sales copywriting. So I tracked down all those different books. I think over the span of about 1 or 2 years, I read about 15 books on sales copywriting. I know what you're thinking, I clearly need to get out more, but it was actually quite an education. And as I went through those books, I realized that sales copywriting is absolutely a skill. And when we think about our role as product marketers, if you can actually put sales copywriting and effective sales copywriting to work for you, I think it'll make you far more successful in your career. So we're going to talk about a few different things. The first thing is we're going to say, when we talk about sales copywriting, what exactly do we mean? I'm also going to try to make sure it's really clear why I think it's so important. And again, we only have half an hour, so we're not going to cover absolutely everything. What I've tried to do is pick on some of the specific things that I think will make a big difference, things that you can actually implement in your job as a product marketer starting this week. So let's dig in. So first of all, what is sales copywriting? Now, I actually have given presentations before where at the end of the presentation, someone said, what does this have to do with the legal process of getting a copyright? So clearly someone missed it. Now, if we're talking about sales copywriting, all we're talking about is how we leverage words in our marketing and really how we can actually get scale with the marketing that we're doing. So when you think about sales copywriting, hopefully what I'm hoping that you're actually thinking about is how do we use words obviously on our web copy, any email marketing we might be doing, video scripts that you might be putting together, your social media posts. If you have physical packaging, that's obviously a place where you can leverage sales copywriting as well. So basically anywhere we have words, we want to use that. It's basically a way to move a prospect through the funnel. So obviously sales copywriting is important whether you're talking about the top of the funnel, the bottom of the funnel. And really it's just a case of looking at how do we actually use specific words and ways of approaching the copy that we're writing for customers and prospects to move them through the funnel. That's really all we're talking about here. Now, when you think about the importance of good sales copy, imagine, if you will, a great product that's badly marketed with bad copy. It's probably going to inhibit its success. Yeah, I'm sure you would agree with that. Now, let's look at another example where you actually have maybe a mediocre product, but it's incredibly well marketed with very strong sales copy. You could expect that in the short term, at least, that they would actually still do very well with that product. Obviously, over time, word would catch up and that may not be the case, but certainly in the short run. Now, let's imagine we have both a great product and great marketing and great sales copy. Now, again, that just becomes a multiplier. So that's really what I want to impress upon you, is that sales copy it's a tool that we want to put working towards, in our advantage, basically. Now, the last thing I wanted to highlight too is that I don't know about the size of the organization that you work for. Maybe you work for a small startup where basically you're having to write the sales copy. And clearly that's a compelling reason why you need to know how to write effective sales copy. It might be, on the other hand, that you work for a very large organization where perhaps there are full-time sales copywriters, or maybe you use an agency. Even if that's the case, I still want to encourage you to think about the importance of sales copywriting, because the reality is, as product marketers, you're going to be consulted throughout the process to actually provide feedback on copy, to give your input into it. And if you don't know what good copy looks like, you're not really going to know how effective it's going to be working for you. And similarly, there will be times that bad copy is put in front of you, and if you don't really know what those telltale signs are to be looking for, you're not going to be able to influence the direction of the sales copy as a product marketer. So again, that's why I think it's so important for all of you. Now, let's break this down a little bit in terms of, well, what does good copy look like, and then also bad copy? This instantly made me think of good cop, bad cop. But when you think about it, I like this analogy of an iceberg where you have what you can see above the water line, and then obviously what's below it. And I would argue that a lot of what you're going to find out there is actually really bad copy, and it's really a small portion of it that's the good copy. So what I'm hoping is that all of you are going to be focused on how you can be writing the best possible copy. So let's focus on the good. So in terms of, well, what does good look like, or great copy? It sounds very simple, but you'd be surprised how often this is the case, that people don't put the customer's needs first. So that's the key thing here, is that in tech, we tend to have this tendency to want to talk about our products and the different features and the capabilities and technically what's involved. The reality is we need to put the customer's needs first, which means it's a complete mind shift in how you actually write your sales copy. So good copy always puts the customer's needs first. In terms of the words that you use, you and your are gold when you see this in sales copy, because when you do that, you're speaking to a person and you're speaking to their specific needs. The other thing about good sales copy is that it solves painful problems. Again, this is the challenge we have in the tech world, is sometimes we don't have the immediacy. And the thing is, if you have a painful problem, sorry if this sounds like a strange example, but if you're bleeding somewhere in your body, clearly you're going to pay whatever it takes to get a solution. You want an immediate solution. You're not going to wait around. And I think that's the thing, is we need to figure out how are we actually solving painful problems for our customers, because the more painful the problem, the faster they're going to want to get a solution, and obviously, in many cases, pay a premium for that as well. Good copy also commands attention. If you guys look at what you look at on the internet, there's content everywhere, right? You read the news, you look at social media, there's stuff everywhere, but then certain things actually command our attention. Throughout this presentation, we're going to get a little bit more into what are those things that command your attention, but clearly good copy is something that can actually get through to someone and get them to sit up and pay attention. And then the last one here for good copy is that it focuses on benefits. Again, we don't want to be talking features and functions if you're used to hearing that expression in the tech world. We want to think about what's important for the customer, how do they benefit? So that's the good. Now, if we look at the bad and we flip this over, very much it's when we see that tech companies put the products first and they get really technical into the details and into the weeds. It doesn't mean the detail isn't important to prospects. It's really when and how we position it and how we connect those things to what's actually important to them in a way that they can understand. Bad copy also does a lot of we and our. So when you look at the copy, and if it says, we are a leader in such and such an industry, or our reputation's been built on, etc., that's not what you want to see. Again, instead of focusing on your organization, your products, you want to focus it onto the customer and the prospect. Bad copy, it's also unclear what problems it solves. I've helped many startups over the years, and even in large organizations, this can be a challenge as well, that you're reading it and it's almost as though someone who's written the copy is just trying to put all the facts out there, but it's not necessarily clear what problem it solves. So again, that's what you're going to see in bad copy. Another thing with bad copy is they can be very generic in nature and be loaded with cliches. How many times have you seen this when, a reference to best in class or real time or whatever? I mean, I know you guys probably, and actually, I think there is a chat window here. Please throw in other cliches that maybe you really hate in the tech world. But again, we don't want to be generic in our language. We also don't want to use cliches. Why? If we use cliches, it really doesn't tell us anything, or generic expressions or ways of describing things, because we don't really have a sense of what it is we're even talking about. So we want to be really clear. We want to be really specific. The last thing about bad copy is that it focuses on features. Again, what do prospects and customers care? They care about themselves. If we focus on features, we're focusing on the wrong thing. And again, it doesn't mean you can't get to that, but you have to first start with what's important to the customer, and then through a journey, actually get them to figuring out how the product solves those problems. But again, we'll get into that. So how do we entice our prospects? And for any of you Anchorman fans, I thought this one was a nice little GIF. You can tell I've got a bit of an addiction to GIFs here. So we want to entice the prospect, and really that's about getting through to them and what's important for them. So we have to ask ourselves, what's important for our prospect? So the three things that I've highlighted here are needs, wants, and desires. Let's break this down a bit. When we talk about needs, this is something, I mean, this is pretty clear, right? What does the customer need? You know, what do they want? And actually, if you're familiar with a famous business coach named Dan Sullivan, he actually has a really good riff on needs versus wants. And the thing that he came up with, he said, you know, I don't sell my products to people who need my products. I focus on selling them to people who want my products. Now, if we think about let's think about a smoker, for example. They may need to stop smoking for the good of their health. However, if they don't want to stop smoking, how much success we're going to have in convincing them to stop? It's probably a very low probability of it. Nevertheless, this is still a good way of thinking about it. You know, needs that the customer has, the wants, which is really something that they've identified that this is actually something that they want to take action and do something about. Then the third one that I've listed here are desires. So again, when you think about wants, I kind of think about desires with lots of fuel thrown on top of it. That's really strong. It's burning inside of you. Now, there are a lot of different products we can think about in terms of needs, wants, and desires. When we think about when the iPhone first was introduced to the market, and I guess that would have been the early 2000s, people didn't have a mobile phone problem. They didn't have the phones that they were using, the mobiles were not, it's not that they couldn't make very good phone calls. It wasn't that they couldn't send texts or emails, and it wasn't the iPhone did those things better. But what Apple did was obviously tap into something much stronger, this deeper desire. And when we're writing sales copy, again, you need to be thinking about that as well. What are the desires of your prospects and your customers? There can be a tendency sometimes to think that this is a little bit easier to do when you're doing business to consumer, in the sense that the different desires that we have. But the thing to remember is that when you're doing business to business, you are still selling to a person who has needs, wants, and desires. And again, it might be a little bit different what those are in a professional context versus personal, but very much you have to think about how are you selling to a person and what's important to them. And again, you hopefully in your organization have done some work on user personas to understand, well, who are the different types of users? What are the different buyer personas? What's important to them? All these things, by really understanding those things in detail, this is going to help you to write better sales copy. And again, to figure out what's going to resonate with those audiences with your sales copy. So another little tool that can be helpful is this acronym PAS, Problem, Agitate, Solution. So if we break this down, when you're writing sales copy, this can be very effective because obviously what do you want to do? Remember we talked about focusing on the needs of the customer and what's important to them. So when we think about them, we have to start off with their problem, right? What is it that they're trying to solve in some way, shape, or form? So when we write in our sales copy, we want to make sure that we're not glossing over or even skipping the problem. Don't want to do that. What we want to do is we want to make sure that we shine a light on what the problem is, and then even describe it or maybe even elaborate on what that problem is. Now, again, why would we do that? One is there can sometimes be a wrong assumption of what problem we're trying to help the prospect solve. So we want to be really explicit about the problem we're trying to solve. The thing too, though, is that sometimes in a prospect's mind, they may not even be really clear on what the problem is for themselves. And I'm sure many of you have had this probably, we all buy lots of different things in our lives. There sometimes maybe is a product category you're looking to buy a product, but because you don't know very much about it, or maybe you're early in your research phase, you're not completely clear on what the problem is that you're trying to solve. You might have a bit of a sense, but by being really elaborate with how we define the problem, that can also be very helpful to the prospect. So after problem, we have the next step, which is agitate. Now, this can be a very pejorative word. Ooh, we want to agitate something. But when we agitate, what we're trying to do is to make sure that this problem seems big enough that the prospect actually wants to solve this right away. Because what we don't want to have is a problem that doesn't seem that significant that they're not going to take action on, because obviously our marketing's not working if they don't do what we want them to do. So when you agitate, what you're trying to do is make sure that they understand just how big of a problem this is. And how would we do that? Well, one thing you could do is say if you were highlighting that the customer has a problem in a certain area, to agitate it, you might actually say, did you realize that this might actually equate to this much lost revenue each month, or perhaps this sort of excess expense that you might have on a monthly basis, or over 12 months, it equates to this. So agitating is really about quantifying and helping them to see just how painful of a problem this is for them. Again, with the idea being is we want to move them closer to taking action. So we've got problem, we have agitation, we agitated a bit. And then the last step here is solution, which is really where we come in galloping on the unicorn. No, okay, it's not quite that extreme. But where we come in with the solution, where we basically show them how we can take away the problem and help them end up with a better outcome. So that's the key thing there. And I think the thing too is we don't throw features and functions in terms of capabilities. We're basically showing them with these problems, this is exactly how we can solve this problem. So again, this is a formula, PAS, problem, agitate, solution, that can be very handy. I didn't come up with this one. I actually don't know who ultimately came up with it, but in sales copywriting, again, can just be a useful reminder when you're writing sales copy that you're thinking about the steps that you're going through. Now, a couple of things that aren't in this model, but are also useful to think about as well, is when we talk about solution, a natural step after that would be to also talk about benefits. And again, what is a benefit? Ultimately, a benefit is how is the customer or the prospect's life going to be better? And again, the more that we can quantify that, it just makes it easier for them to come to the conclusion that we want them to, which is that basically their lives would be better by buying our product or our service. And then the last thing I wanted to highlight too on this one is if you're familiar with this concept of social proof, really what it is it's looking at what is the evidence that basically gives the prospect to the customer more confidence to think that we're the right solution. So social proof could be anything from, say, if you have an analyst that has said positive things about your product or service, making sure that that's clear to build trust. It could be good customer references, customer stories, testimonials, these types of things. If your product is on a review or rating site and you actually reference those things in terms of, you've got 9 stars out of 10 or whatever, or you've got a such and such Glassdoor rating, whatever the case may be, all these things collectively just help to build trust. And again, it's not because I've had people ask this question, well, do people really buy into social proof? I think the reality is that there are a lot of things out there that we do trust, and there are a lot of things that we don't trust. But as product marketers, and again, as aspiring sales copywriters, hopefully you all are now, we want to try to use as much as we can to paint a picture so the prospect or the customer feels confident to move forward with the solution that we're going to be offering them. So how do you write better sales copy? And again, if you're familiar with this Shia LaBeouf meme, yes, you can. I won't reenact this one. If you haven't seen it, we'll drop a link in the chat window. It's a very funny video. But yeah, the question is, how do you write better sales copy? What should you actually do? So I do have a few ideas. And again, I've coached many people over the years in terms of what they can do to write better sales copy. So what do you want to do? You want to do these things. One, we talked about this earlier in our talk here. Always start with the customer, always. You have to put them front and center and think about what's important to them and speak to that. Again, if people in your organization are trying to talk features and functions, steer them away and say, no, I've seen the light. This is where we want to go. Let's start with the customer. it sounds obvious, but take a look at the copy in your organization. Is this always done? In my experience, the majority of the times it's not. We focus on what we know, which is we know our products really well. Shift that over, always start with the customer. The second one is plan before you're writing. Now, the plan, I'm trying to remember, this is Mike Tyson quote, a plan is all well and good until you get punched in the face. A plan doesn't mean we're going to perfectly execute this plan. It's not going to turn out exactly the way we planned it. I think when we say planning before writing is really just give it a little bit of thought. Sometimes you've got that white page in front of you, your Word doc, and then you think, oh man, where do I start? I'm just suddenly having to just pop out all this sales copy. Planning before you're writing is really, maybe it's putting down some bullet points in terms of, okay, what's important to the customer? Maybe you write a few bullet points down. What problems they solve? How might I agitate this? What are some things that I could drop on? It's really just putting some ideas down about, what does that journey look like of what I want to guide the prospect through to get them from where they are now to some other stage, whether that's further along in your sales funnel or ultimately to buying. But spending some time planning is always going to be a good thing, and it's going to help you because then there's a bit of a method to the madness of how you're going to write your sales copy. The third one we have here is brainstorm to generate lots of ideas. Now, again, I'm sure many of you have written headlines in your day, whether it be a subject line for an email, a headline for a great talk. You name it. Headlines are everywhere, right? Now, the thing is, what we want to do, and it's not just headlines, it could be calls to action, but what we want to do is we want to brainstorm ideas and just get lots of ideas out there. I was recently helping someone who's generating an online course write some copy. And what we found is that what you got to do is you just literally have to get a page out and just start putting ideas. Even if they're bad ideas, just put it down. And when you go through a brainstorming exercise, it's not to filter each idea and to make it better. Just even if you have a sense of some of the words that might be handy, just put it down. And then what you find is by having it down there, you might look at it and say, actually, what if I change this word to that word? Now you've got a second option. Actually, what if I even added a couple more words to make it clear? Now you've got a third option. And if you do this and, before you know it, within 10 or 15 minutes, you're going to have a great list of ideas. Doesn't mean you can use all of them. Might mean you've got one great line that could become a subject line or a headline. But what you might also find is that the rest of the copy that you've jotted down, which again is just brainstorming, might actually pick up certain themes that you might want to bring into your copy. So brainstorming without filtering, you'd be amazed at how effective this can be. The fourth one here is write for a real person. And again, sometimes people get really lost when they see this blank white page thinking, oh geez, where do I start with the sales copy? And often what can be really effective is write it as though you're speaking to a real person. So picture that person. If there's an actual customer of yours that you know quite well, imagine they're sitting right across the table from you, and how would you describe it to them? Or if that doesn't work for you, have a colleague sit there and maybe you record yourself as you're talking to them. And again, it's going to sound very natural and it's going to sound real. And that's the reality, right? Is that people are inundated with so much bad marketing. We want to make it sound real and personable so it gets through to them. So that is a really useful thing. Now, on this topic of writing for a real person, another thing that can also be very helpful, and again, this is going to be context specific, right? If you work in the legal profession, this suggestion is not going to work. But in a lot of other areas, what I was going to suggest is actually using less formal language. Now, what I'm not talking about is slang, and well, again, that could be effective in some things. You have to know your audience. But when I say less formal language, what I'm actually referring to is if you look at, just pick a piece of writing that you have done recently, or maybe you've reviewed in your organization. As you look through it, look and see, is there a chance to actually change some of those words to contractions? And it's funny, if you do this, you'd be surprised at one, is it actually improves the readability because now there are fewer syllables in your sales copy. And again, it becomes faster to read, both mentally and also if you read it out loud. But it also takes the formality down and it starts to feel more personable. It's a really simple thing, but I'd encourage you to give it a shot. The last one here to write better sales copy is always challenge your copy. Whether you're reviewing someone else's or if you're going back and re-reviewing your own, just challenge yourself. You read something, say, well, so what? Who cares? And it's funny because you might actually think, wow, I'm speaking in very generic terms, or yeah, you know what, I haven't actually hit to the heart of why this would be really important for a product, or sorry, for a prospect. So again, that's a really helpful one. Challenge it. So what? Who cares? Give that one a go. All right, we're getting into the home stretch here. We also want to be able to create calls to action that work. And again, as you remember from the scene from Jerry Maguire, you know, he had her at hello. So that's really clearly a very effective call to action. But kidding aside, there are some very specific things that you can do to write better calls to action. So what do we need to do here? We want to make sure that they're clear, that they're compelling, and they're concise. And again, they're not in priority sequencing, but these are really the 3 C's. So let's break these down for a moment. We want to have a clear call to action because I've seen many marketing documents before where they go through everything and then there's not a clear call to action at the end. And the prospect's thinking, well, what do I do next? I'm not really clear what it is that I need to do. It needs to be so specific. And often what they might, in effective sales copy, they might even say, the first thing you need to do is this, then you'll need to do that, and then the final step is whatever. So you want to make sure that those call to actions are very clear so the prospect knows exactly what you want them to do. And really, that's your job. You need to tell them in very clear terms what you need them to do next. The second one here for a compelling call, or sorry, there's a bit subliminal. To write a better call to action, make sure that it is compelling. So why do we want that? The thing is, if it's not compelling, they are not going to take action. So we need to make sure that we know exactly what's important to them so we can compel them. And again, I'll try not to go back to the wounded person example where if you're bleeding, it's going to be very compelling to get a bandage to stop that bleeding. Whatever it is that's compelling for your prospect, make sure you understand what that is and really speak to why it's compelling and why they need to take action right now. And actually, on the compelling side of it, sometimes what you might do is have a limited time offer. And again, if it's time bound, that can sometimes be that lever to get them to take a specific action. Then the last element of an effective call to action is it needs to be concise. We could go on and on and on, and if the person just says, oh, forget it, I'm confused, I don't know what I need to do here, forget it, they're just going to quit. We need to be concise. We need to get to the point and make sure they know exactly what we want them to do and just get right to that point so they know what the next step is. So clear, compelling, concise calls to action are very important. And again, think about using calls to action in all your sales copy. At the beginning, we talked about sales copy in websites, email marketing campaigns, social media posts, video scripts. I mean, you name it, wherever you are using sales copy, always use a call to action. Otherwise, I would ask, why are you even writing it? So again, think about how you're trying to get them to do whatever it is that you want them to do. So one thing, just before we close here, I also wanted to highlight something that I actually should have mentioned in the beginning, is that when we think about sales copywriting, I want to also be really clear that this is about connecting good things to people who need them. When we talk about sales copywriting, we're not trying to shove products down people's throats. We're not trying to create a mismatch of just sell it to whoever will buy it. No, we want to feel good as product marketers that the things that we're selling are actually a really great fit for the people who buy them. And really all that sales copywriting achieves is that it helps you to get that connection better. And it also ensures that you get that connection rather than your competitor. So again, I want to advocate that sales copywriting is a tool for good, not for evil. And I'm sure all of you see it that way as well. So we're at the end of our time here. I want to thank you very much for your attention. I hope this has helped you take away a few really important things. If you would like to connect on LinkedIn, I am on LinkedIn, Eric Moeller, Director of Product Marketing at Sage. Please feel free to connect with me and just let me know that you're from PMA, because I don't always accept requests, but if I know it's from someone from the Product Marketing Alliance, I'd be happy to connect with you. If you have any questions, please also feel free to send me a direct message as well. I'm always happy to get those questions, and if I can help you, I would be happy to do so. Thank you very much for your time today. I hope you enjoy the rest of the event today, and look forward to connecting with you. Take care.
Whether you're sinking your teeth into a PMA event for the first time or have come back for a second bite of the cherry, welcome to Product Marketing Rendezvous. Before we set the ball rolling, we want to say a huge thank you to our speakers, you and everyone who is joining this event from around the world. We are sure you'll enjoy the sessions from our one-of-a-kind international lineup. With expert presentations, specialist talks and deep dive panel sessions on the agenda, suffice it to say, you're in for a treat. And here is some more good news. The insights don't stop here, not by a long shot. Our Slack community is home to dynamic conversations and contributions from thousands upon thousands of fellow product marketers. So if you're not already a member, come and join us today. It won't cost you a penny. If you have questions for the speakers or want to connect with them further, then please ask away in the comments section of the video or catch up with them on the PMA Slack community. But for now, sit back and join the rendezvous.
So, hello everyone. We are so excited to be here today on this panel and wish you all a very good morning, afternoon, or even evening, depending on which part of the world are you in. So we have a truly global panel here today. Who's, over the years, the role of product marketing has really evolved quite a bit. And today we are just going to discuss some of the key challenges facing specialist product marketeers, how the role has evolved, what it takes to influence the senior leadership and get that ball rolling, how to do effective cross-functional collaboration, especially in this new normal setting, and much more. We really hope that at the end of this panel, you can take away some tips and tricks and use them in your own product marketing disciplines. So let's start with some introductions. Alicia, can you tell us a little more about yourself?
Yeah, sure. Hello, everyone. My name is Alicia. I'm from San Francisco, but I now live in London for the past 5 years. About an hour ago, I passed my permanent residency exam, so now they're stuck with me, which is great.
Hey.
Yeah, I think. But yeah, my background is in early stage startups. However, for the past 3 years, I've been at Deliveroo, which is a global food delivery company.
Nice. Thank you so much, Alicia. Swati, do you want to tell us a little more about yourself?
For sure. Hi, everybody. My name is Swati. I'm actually in San Francisco right now. So Alicia, your former stomping grounds. I work at LinkedIn and I sit on the B2B side of our business, so work very closely with our teams across talent, learning, and Glint. And I've been in this role for, it'll soon be almost 3 years, but previously to this, I led a very different life on Wall Street in New York, where I worked on the trading floor at JP Morgan and as well as Bear Stearns.
Nice. That sounds very interesting. So, Jonathan, do you want to tell us a little more about yourself now?
Yes, please. So I'm Jonathan from Tel Aviv, Israel. I am Director of Product Marketing at Elementor, which is the leading website building platform on WordPress, currently powering more than 6 million websites built predominantly by professionals. Prior to that, I was actually across the street over at Wix.com for about 4 years, so didn't kind of venture far from the from the website building postcode. I too actually led a very, very different life prior to kind of landing on product marketing. I used to do freelance content marketing. Before that, I was a professional musician. I lived in London for 3 years, practiced that there. Yep, it happened. And yeah, almost stumbled upon product marketing, and it is kind of a calling now. So really happy to be part of this.
Nice. That's a very interesting journey indeed, and a very global one as well. Thank you so much, Jonathan, for that. And hi, everyone. My name is Shreya, and I lead product marketing for Finturi. It's a Dutch fintech startup, and we are trying to use new technologies like blockchain, artificial intelligence to make working capital, much more accessible and affordable, more importantly, to SMEs. So our goal is, to make sure that SMEs can get working capital easily and at good rates, so that they can concentrate on their business and leave some of the working capital worries aside. I am in India at the moment, but I've been a bit of a traveler. So I've worked in the United States for about a year earlier. I was in Abu Dhabi for some time. I was in Netherlands for more than a year and a half. And last year, actually, I moved back to India. So I love traveling and I don't really mind going to new places, meeting new people and exploring different cultures. And that has really helped me also, I think. Prior to product marketing, I have been into roles like program manager. I've been into roles of project management, but I think all the prior roles kind of gave me bits and pieces of skills, and combined with my interest in product marketing, it all came together. And I thought, okay, product marketing is indeed what I want to do for the rest of my life, hopefully. So that's a little bit about myself. But now that we know all our panelists, why don't we just dive right into some of the juicy stuff and interesting stories you might want to hear. So as we all know, in the past few years, there has been a lot of awareness about the role of product marketing into companies, what it means, what are the kind of activities which it involves, etc. So the role has really evolved quite a bit. So Alicia, do you want to share with us maybe your experience on how the role has evolved since the beginning of your career as a product marketer, and what impact has it had on your day-to-day working life?
Yes. So I guess one thing I forgot to mention is that prior to product marketing, I was a kind of more traditional channel digital marketer. I actually got a degree in sustainable tourism, so there was a bit of a gap there. But I like that there's a similarity in all of our answers about kind of discovering product marketing, because no one goes to university to study product marketing. Everyone has this moment where you either see a job description or you see a colleague, and you're like, those are my favorite parts of my job. I didn't know that that's a niche. And so certainly that was my story. So I had kind of gotten, as a traditional channel marketer, and then slowly got closer and closer to our tech teams, was fascinated with that world, found easy opportunities on the table to connect our commercial teams and our marketing teams through to the people who are building the product. And there's so much value there. So I think my story is not unique in that I kind of found my own path thinking that I made it up, but I didn't. It was like a whole industry. And so in doing so, I started as a very broad generalist, and kind of was just doing what felt good in ways that I could quantify the voice of our users and inform, the roadmap or our marketing strategy with their input. And over time, both as the companies that I've worked for have evolved. I mentioned early stage, and now I'm at a global kind of industry leading company, which is not scary sometimes, but working on the restaurant side, my role has become a bit more narrow, and I have to constantly be reevaluating and checking myself and thinking, is this actually product marketing? Or, this is like, we spend like 50% of our time being like, what are we? Who are we? But constantly trying to reevaluate whether or not things are product marketing and should be within that constraint of the role. Or is it something that I'm just used to because I have done that in the past? So I think the top kind of traits or things that I've learned that I would recommend for people are, one, a sense of patience and being open to adapting and evolving your role, because oftentimes it opens up new opportunities for you to add impact. And the other is resilience. So patience and resilience, I think, are a nice balance of the softer things that you should focus on in your career.
Interesting. That's indeed the role of product marketing has evolved a lot, but even then, it's always a constant, a constant game of, what exactly should fall in it and how much influence do product marketeers need to have on senior leadership and the company-wide decisions and how we go about it. That's a very interesting journey you shared with us, Alicia. And Swati, would you like to add anything to that on based on your experience?
Yeah, I mean, I think that what's really interesting about this panel, and I bet if we were in a room and having a conversation live with the viewers, I think a lot of us have a non-traditional path into this particular function. And I think it makes for a very interesting conversation, not just for this panel, but even when we're in the rooms trying to build consensus, getting different points of views, making sure that we're not entering into a situation where there's a high degree of agreeableness. And I think that that's really important, right? Because especially as we think about bringing new products to life, we want to be able to bring those diverse perspectives. And so I just +1 to everything that Alicia was saying. I think it's really important to know your own perspective, your own point of view, do your diligence around whatever the problem is you're trying to solve, and bring, a point of view that's rooted in facts rather than opinions, because those become harder to refute. And at the end of the day, that is really important, right? In terms of, if you think about the scope of responsibilities that PMMs have, we are doing a lot of macro level analysis, but also are very responsible for those micro executional pieces. And I really think having that balance and being able to swing from one end to another is something that makes this role very enjoyable for me personally.
Indeed, indeed. Like having this as product marketers, I think one of the most important things which we do is cross-functional collaboration, right? And getting everyone on the same page, not only externally, but also internally, different teams, building that consensus and finally getting that ball rolling. I think that's one of the key things, like product marketers, that thread, right? Which ties the entire multiple disciplines together and communicates the true value of the product, both internally and externally. So that's really nice. And while we work with everyone, etc., there are also sometimes some smaller things, right, which really help us in order to add more value to the business. So Jonathan, do you want to share any of your experiences where you might have identified certain tracks which could have a lot of impact on the business line, but which had to be fixed, and how as a product marketing team you could add more value by identifying those?
What I've learned is that product marketers, one of the things that they serve, I think, in an organization is the fact that they speak multiple languages. So they they master the dialect of a lot of different departments that don't necessarily communicate with each other or don't do so effectively. And that's kind of what I think is the make or break moment for a product marketer. And to be that, you don't necessarily need to be of a particular background. Like I always say, brilliant product marketers came out of people who were bartenders or photographers or DJs or musicians or anyone who's doing a multidisciplinary thing. It doesn't necessarily have to be painted in a very, very kind of tech shade. So for me, it was, I don't know if it's a small thing, but it is definitely to be able to exist simultaneously as both analytical and creative, and not necessarily be the best in each one, but to be able to quantify creative and brand effort, and to be able to kind of put a very nice shade of color on data.
Yeah, indeed. Thanks for that insight, Jonathan. And I think the world is moving more and more to data-driven decision making, right? Nowadays, they really believe that, you know, if God says something, they definitely believe in it. But if anyone else is talking, they have to provide data to kind of back their talk, right? So I think that's really interesting. And as product marketing, though, you know, we kind of sometimes have like, especially if you're in smaller startups, you kind of have like a overview of the entire, you know, end-to-end funnel which is going on. And I think one very interesting thing at that point is also, if you go just like, especially if the product is a freemium model or something of that sort, what's also very interesting is if you go through the entire customer journey, thinking from a user point of view, and, you know, thinking about the psychology of the user while they go through it, and identify those certain triggers, and have that certain, you know, thing pop up, or use those triggers to actually convert the free user into paid user. That's also, you know, such things also really act a huge impact, and product marketing can play a really important role in, you know, identifying these small but sometimes overlooked you know, areas of the business. And I think in our previous chats before the panel discussion, as Jonathan rightly mentioned, the forgotten debris, you know, is something which product marketers can really identify and add value to. Do you want to say something about it?
Yeah, I mean, something that sort of comes to mind is when I was applying for a job sort of a year and a half ago, and one of the tasks that I was given is give a critical analysis of our user flow, which I did, and then I was kind of being said, like, it's a good thing the CEO wasn't in the room because he would have been kicked out. And the reason for that was like, okay, I'm going to go through this as though I am the sort of like the lowest level user with minimal intent and minimal understanding of what's ahead. And that is kind of how I reviewed and how I critiqued each step of the journey, which is exactly what you're describing. Because at any moment that we are not, you know, holding our user by the hand and thinking, what do they know about the state that they have just entered? What do they know about where they're headed next? What do they know about the moment that we will be asking them to pay for something? Will they understand what they'll be paying for? When will the next payment come? What won't be available if they won't pay? And so on. There's a really, really huge deal of empathy that is just intrinsic in this role that we took upon ourselves. Much more so, I think, than any other sort of quantifiable business metric. You know, being the role of interpreters, we just need to kind of just lace everything with empathy, even when challenged.
Could I build on top of that? Because I completely agree. And I think that we don't often make space for that as a valued skill. And at the end of the day, we're all just people. And it's amazing, you know, if I'm in a company where the whole business is 30 people or 5,000 people, it's an unfortunate human behavior that sometimes we blame other people, and we blame others for something not going correctly. And it's a common hurdle to overcome, where salespeople don't understand what it means to build a product. And so they're like, oh, our tech teams are terrible. And then similarly, you know, we've got engineers who don't easily have a lot of compassion, and this is obviously all generalizations, but like don't have compassion for what it means to actually sell the value of a product. And at the end of the day, it's probably that all of those teams are all really good at their jobs, but as Jonathan says, they're not speaking the same language. And that's why I think that patience and empathy is actually a really important part of being a good PMM, and pulling the right data together and the right insights to synthesize them together in a universal language that everyone can kind of get their bit from and understand and be like, okay, it's not easy to build like a SaaS product in a quarter, or it's hard to get over objections from your target users. So yeah, and I think certainly there's ways of doing that analysis autonomously, and just as Jonathan has said, kind of going through the user journey and trying to put yourself in the shoes of someone with low intent, low interest, all of those things. But a big piece of what I try to talk about when I do kind of like product marketing consulting is the idea or the notion. A lot of people who say my product is amazing, my product is going to solve all these problems for all these people, you are in this insular mindset of assuming that you're going to solve all those problems the best for all these people, and to assume that like because a product is great that the right people will find it, will understand that true unique value prop, and then adopt the product and stick with it. When you put it that way, it's actually pretty unrealistic that those things are going to happen without really understanding every milestone they have to hit, every value pillar they need to experience. And so I think this, like, it sounds kind of like a light kind of, human thing, but I think it's incredibly important. And I don't know how you could really be a super successful product marketer without understanding how to do that piece of it. That's my soapbox, sorry.
Indeed, and especially in this virtual world when everyone is kind of trying to do their best, but also in different circumstances, and trying to adapt with the new normal. And I think also I don't have experience with it, but a lot of people with kids, etc., are facing even more different kind of challenges, have faced a lot of challenges in the past year. So it becomes even more necessary for every person, along with the product marketer, but as a company also, that everyone feels empathy, everyone touches base with each other once in a while, just to be human, just to, make sure that the person is all right. And I think if you build, if you have empathy and if you build a good rapport with, different team members, especially as product marketing, since we need to collaborate with so many people, it really helps a lot of times to get consensus and also, get the projects up and running because sometimes the discussions can take forever, right? But if you want to also, like, especially if you're in scale ups, time is also of real value. So I think in that case, if you have a rapport already, and it really helps a lot in the process. So very interesting point. Empathy, I think that's the key and the most valuable skill in personally think in both our professionals and private lives as well. But yeah, indeed. And so how does as product marketing, we a lot of times have to influence the senior leadership, right? Make them see the value in what we do. So how do you guys kind of approach that? Do you have like, do you just have certain business metrics and you show like, this is how it was, this is how it is now, or is there any qualitative measurements you use to, kind of influence them? What's the how do you guys go about it?
I can kick us off on this one. So I think it's an interesting point, right? Because influencing senior leadership, especially if you don't have authority over them, I think becomes very much an art in trying to understand, like, what are their motivations? What do they care about? What are they being measured on? How are these different building blocks of the business coming together? And what I think is really unique, at least from the product marketing standpoint, is though we may be further removed from where the revenue is being generated within the company, we do have that entire end-to-end view of the revenue base of the whole company. And in many ways, I think that our responsibility becomes being the glue for all these different functions, and also at the same time, being able to weave these common threads through sales professionals, marketing colleagues, product professionals, really to the point where over time you start to build trust and you get, it's not necessarily about your title, but it's more about rooted in that trust and the leadership aspects that you can bring and helping to move the entire company forward. So I think it's definitely one of the more challenging aspects of our role, but essentially we're trying to help, other people stand on our shoulders and look above the wall to sort of see what's coming up on the horizon. And it's hard, right? I think you have to earn to a certain degree the right to be one of those strategic players and get a seat at the table. And one of the things that I learned from my time on finance, which I worked with a lot of male colleagues, there are not that many women in the field, but I always noticed coming into these meetings, there was already a set level of agreement or consensus about like where we were going to go, right? And it was something that I observed that, men in the industry did really well. And I probed into it and tried to understand like, how is this happening? Because I felt that whenever a female was presenting, it was very different. There wasn't like a consensus had already been achieved. And what I noticed is people are building consensus way before you even get into that room, right? If you're trying to build consensus by the time you're in that meeting, you're already behind. You should be meeting with your individual stakeholders well before you even set step into that meeting, because that meeting is the final approval and sort of the roundabout nods from everyone there, because you've already done the diligence of understanding what do each of these stakeholders want, how are we moving this entire collective to that endpoint. And really that last checkpoint is sort of one final nod and agreement from everyone in the room that this is the path we're going to take. And so that's something that I've tried to bring into my life here in product marketing. And I think that it's a really important quality that obviously is just not unique to this function, given how I saw it play out in my prior role, but being that glue and being able to help move our teams towards that final destination because of the view that we have, I think is really important in developing our strategic voice and being able to take a problem, structure it, put together a plan, and move everyone towards the end goal.
I have some comments on that if I can. I don't want to talk. It's hard to know. I wish we were in the same room to be able to like feel it out. But I completely agree with that. And that's something that I kind of had to learn through my time at Deliveroo, starting as a product marketing manager and now looking after our team, is like, the point you mentioned about authority is really important. And I think like to create space for our work and our strategic thinking, you have to do that. It won't be handed to you. So we do things, I'm sure everyone does this, like an area review, just as you've kind of described, Swati, where like you get everyone in a room, you get senior execs, you've got the people doing the actual work, you've got stakeholders dependent on that work. And then we kind of have a proposal of what we want to do and why we want to do it and what we want to affect. And I have found that if I don't go to every single key person on the rapid, go to the senior exec, have a one-to-one, show them my thinking, and kind of get their vote before that session, it's a completely different feel of a meeting. Then you can kind of come in, you sit down, you get the approval, and you go on. And that's where that trust is built with those senior execs. Another point I wanted to bring on top of that is the idea of a shared goal, where certainly I will layer goals on top of our shared goals that are specific to PMM, moving customers from one segment to a higher value segment, things like that. But I really try to align us with the same commercial goals that our product teams are held to for a new product. And I find that helps us work as one team, as one unit towards that vision. So shared goals, whether that's revenue target, a satisfaction improvement, a growth or incremental order kind of a target. And that leads me to my last point that, Swati, I actually learned from LinkedIn, which is the idea of vision to values.
Yeah.
Wow, revelations. Like I know, people share resources all the time. That's one that I consistently find myself going back to. It's something that LinkedIn CEO, CMO, someone put it together. And it's the idea of laddering your shared goals and your commercial targets to a mission, to your objectives, that might be backwards, up to the company's vision. because so often there's a disconnect between what you're actually aiming for and the bigger picture. And so I think PMMs are uniquely positioned to be able to connect those dots by doing that exercise. Everyone should go Google it. And to be an instrumental part in hitting those shared goals. And I found that to be a really strong way to build trust and a seat at the table with senior execs.
I think I actually, I went through that exercise as well. We were doing a whole sort of like brand identity messaging type kind of evolving workshop over, I don't know, a couple of months. And yeah, no, I definitely remember something like that. I think for me, and I've experienced, I think, a pretty wide gamut of executives, from my bosses at Wix, who run a multi-billion-dollar company, with sort of concerns and attention span to match, all the way to the company I currently work in, which the founders are still very, very much hands-on, and they still kind of embody also the user and the user's concern, and they still have a very, very intimate knowledge of the product. And I guess different, because like some of the things that you have mentioned kind of applied to the former, and some of the things applied to the latter. I think right now specifically, it is kind of harkens to to look for areas that are unkempt or untreated, or kind of the debris that is being left in the wake of a very, very fast growth. And it's kind of like you pick those up and you go back to your CEO and you say, look, I've tidied all this up. Like, how awesome is it now? Or for example, if you just own a piece of the company that everyone is kind of just looking at, it's like, you know what, one day, for example, for us, it was building a persona model, which there was sort of a very general one that was building on just the general knowledge of the original employees of the company, of like, who is a baseline WordPress web designer. And I sort of came in and said, no, there's a spectrum there. You have designer marketers, you have developer business owners, you have all of these cross sections, and then actually to go out and to seek those people out and to actually make it your job, your full-time job on top of your full-time job, to go and meet those users where they are and to let them say it back to you in their own language, and then just kind of jam it all into a deck, go back to your CEO and it's like, these are your users. Here they are. Like, from now on, when we talk about our users, we're talking about these people. And you're like, cool.
Did you get like immediate buy-in on that from the execs? Or were they a little bit apprehensive and being like, no, they're not? Because I've had that before.
The apprehension was even before I even switched the deck on. So it was like, okay, surprise me. I'm like, I'm not going to surprise you. I'm going to tell you things but I'm going to tell you that in a way that you have forgotten about. And I'm going to introduce you to a lot of people that that live inside your head, that live inside your product, but I'm going to do so in a way that will just reframe your way of thinking about how we communicate.
Yeah, indeed. I think user persona and also a lot of, other things which we do, I think just require that buy-in from senior management. And I think we at Finturi use the shared goals, like Alicia mentioned, actually. So we try to have like shared goals, and then multiple departments work together in collaboration, and it kind of gives the inclusive feel, which is actually for smaller startups very essential, because everyone has to work together to make the company succeed, and no one can kind of work in silos anyways in the earlier phases of a startup development. But I think we had some very interesting points tested, and I'm sure a lot of product marketers out there face similar kind of, stories on how to get that cross-functional team buy-in and how to convey the value of a project and etc. And one very important point which Jonathan also mentioned was the customer feedback, right? As product marketeers, we are pretty much the voice of the customer, and we try to incorporate that feedback in the product, also in marketing messages, in branding activities, etc., so on and so forth. So how much influence do you guys have on, let's say, the product roadmap or allied activities, and how do you kind of get that voice of the customer embedded into your product so that there is a good story which we can tell the end users about the company?
Sorry, I've got
You
it.
can start us. Sure. I think the voice of the market, the voice of the customer work, Shreya, is so critical as one of our superpowers when it comes to, it's not even just influencing product roadmaps, but just influencing overall strategy for the business, right? If we think about the product side, that's one portion of the broader equation, right? There are a number of things that come into the go-to-market strategy elements as well. And that is equally important in terms of making sure that you're actually grasping those key sound bites and synthesizing what you're hearing in order to provide that strategic direction of where you're going. And I think the key is not just understanding what the voice of the market or customer is, but then effectively going and doing the right job of scaling that knowledge. Okay, because everyone has to come along and understand what is happening, where should we be going, why are we making these decisions this way? And I think that scaling of the knowledge, whether it's through crafting, messaging, whether it's through launching campaigns through marketing channels, whether it's through helping sales and develop collateral to understand their personas, all of these things become integral, I think, to the success of a launch, and even a success of massive change management things that might be happening internally to the organization. And so being able to target in on what those key points are and scale out that knowledge, I think is critical in a unique opportunity that we have as PMMs, more so than a lot of our cross-functional partners.
Yeah, I agree. Go ahead, please.
Oh, Jonathan, do you have anything? Otherwise, I've got it.
Yeah, no, go ahead. I'm still working.
Probably my favorite part of my role at Deliveroo, and I completely agree with everything Swati just said, that it's so much more than just influencing a roadmap. It's pulling all of this strategy together so that your go-to-market is in lockstep with your commercial targets and things like that. But what I found that was really interesting for me in a B2B environment like Deliveroo, where we've got commercial teams in 12 global markets, is that not only did I have to find the right tools to quantify and kind of speak to the voice of my customers or my restaurants, I also have to represent the needs of our commercial teams, because they're the ones trying to sell in our products. And I noticed a couple years ago when I joined that there was a kind of a negative sentiment towards our central teams from the local markets, because they're like, they don't even ask what we care about or how it's going. They just kind of ship us these MVPs, say they're going to do something to improve it, and then move on to the next thing. And so to me, kind of like that debris that Jonathan mentioned is an opportunity. So how, and so then I was like, okay, let's create, scaled feedback loops for these teams so that they feel not only represented, but they are represented in their voice. We can aggregate it together. And so I developed something that's called the Voice of the Stakeholder Report. And it started with a quarterly call where anyone from a general manager to an account manager or whatever was involved. And I would present out to APAC and EU and UK regions what was prioritized, why things were deprioritized, why we weren't able to ship exactly what we said we were going to ship, because that in itself is common, should be expected in tech environments. Doesn't mean it's the end of the world, and it doesn't mean that what you get delivered isn't sellable. So there's value there. And so then also what I was doing is helping to educate the local markets about how to build a business case themselves. So it's not just, screaming the loudest and saying why, I've escalated it to this person, why hasn't it been done? Let's be a little bit more adult about things and say, which users are you trying to create a better experience for? Why does that ladder up to the bigger strategy? How many restaurants have said this? And so then we're getting better quality of feedback. But then what I was able to do is, with one of the surveys, there was a kind of a big debate about what to build next into our a product that I took to market, which was our restaurant ad platform. And lots of markets wanted us to build 15 different things in all different directions that appealed to different restaurants. So bringing all the conversation back to who are we building for and why does that matter to the business, and why does this matter to our users? And then I was able to aggregate their feedback together, and we realized that 56% of the markets agreed that this one particular feature was the actual top thing that we could do to unlock adoption with a new audience that we had historically been under indexing with. So then there's our clear narrative. And then we also have prioritized things in the backlog that we know also has business cases around them. So we were able to replicate that across different orgs in the business. So I'm really happy with that, because it started with that empathy piece and being like, these people don't feel heard. And that's not just like a sad thing, but it's also a huge opportunity commercially. And I think both of those are equally as important.
Yeah, I want to grab a word that you just said, which is narrative, which I feel is kind of just like the cornerstone of most of what I do, at least in the last 6 months. Because we have just begun to kind of scale our product marketing efforts. I was sort of the first hands-on product marketer at the company. We're now a team of 3 and growing, but there was a lot of just tidying up to do, and a lot of it had to do with like, okay, who are we that we introduce ourselves? What are the words that we're using How do we call the action? Do we call it create? Do we call it design? Do we call it build? How do we frame partnerships? And that was, and I love that it took such a huge chunk of my day, because I kind of identified that at that point, that was where I got to impact the most. I think sort of until measurable metrics for product marketing that aren't kind of hard business metrics of upgrades, renewals, churn, and so on, until they solidify a very tactile and immediate goal that you can achieve is how well are you understood, and how well do users sort of read back a messaging that you incepted in their brain 2 months prior, and that you thought at the time was like, what's the difference if I say it like this or if I say it like that? And then they read it back to you in the form of an opportunity or something that was enabled for them, and you're like, that's the difference. And of course that just carries over. I mean, and I think out of all the teams at Elementor now, I think the brand and comms team is the one that kind of feed off of me the most. Like, those are my biggest clients in terms of like, who are we marketing to? What exactly are we marketing them? And at which point in their professional evolution do they need this bit of software or that feature or that capability? That's it.
No, indeed, I agree with you. If we get the building blocks together, then it's very easy to have the entire all the campaigns and launches and everything around it. If there is, all depends on how strong and how correct the building blocks were. And also how fast you can pivot in case there was, you have to pivot due to whatever reasons or due to the way the market has indeed reacted. So in case of Finturi, for example, we really try to constantly, get feedback from sales team on, what things do the SMEs are, what are things that appeal the most to the SMEs? Is there any particular niche segment among the SMEs where, we can concentrate more on? Is there any, special value proposition which might appeal more to them? And we try to kind of get those feedback points and try to, immediately try to inculcate it in our campaigns and also in a product life cycle, like exactly especially because we are in the Dutch market, so we need Dutch as well as English, but primarily we try to put out certain communications in Dutch. So sometimes something sounds like really appealing in English, but when translated in Dutch, it doesn't really sound that appealing anymore, or the vice versa. So, you always have to have that, have, let's say, certain SMEs read it, for example, and just see, can they make sense in 2 minutes? They have to really think about it, or, they just can make sense out of it in 30 seconds. Oh, this is what you do. So I think, especially if you have multilingual, products or content, etc., then sometimes what also becomes very crucial is to make sure that what makes very appealing sense in one language makes equally appealing sense in the other language, because it's just different way in which the feel which you get is slightly different based on the different language. And I think sales can be very, very, the feedback from the sales team and also from the customer support team can also be very crucial in actually, being more and more closer to the audience, because while we can do a lot of user tests, etc., sales folks kind of are in touch with the target audience almost every day, and the same with customer support. So some of the issues which kind of can be overlooked can really be integrated with all the feedback from these teams. And of course, product always has a huge backlog, but if it's the voice of customer, you can try to prioritize it and get a consensus on this particular thing is the priority at this moment, and can help the overall company a lot better. And also, if you want to expand your products or expand certain features, sales, I think, being on ground, are very nicely positioned to identify that these are certain other products in which we already are receiving a lot of demands, and maybe we can probably expand to this particular things as well. So that's indeed an interesting piece of the puzzle, I think. But yeah, now that we have discussed quite a bit about different things related to product marketing, and I'm sure our fellow product marketeers who are listening to this panel are going to find them interesting, and hopefully can take away something about it. Maybe we could wrap up with, let's say, one interesting project or something we are really looking forward to in 2021. And we could also tell our viewers what's the best way to connect with us. So whoever wants to jump in first.
I can try. I mean, I don't know if I can share a whole lot of my 2021 deck. There are some sensitive stuff there, but I can sort of, something that I'm very, very excited about for 2021, other than the birth of my firstborn son, is the fact that, which is coming up in a month, no pressure whatsoever, I'm cool as a cucumber. But one thing that I am actually pretty excited about is I will be recruiting a full-time user and market researcher, which is something that, that was born out of real need and a genuine ask from pretty much every team in the company. Once that itch was scratched and people started to realize how impactful qualitative data is and how significant having that, I don't remember which one of you said it, but to have it at scale. Swati, I think it was you, but like to not just to collect data and collect insight and collect knowledge and wisdom and methods, but to have that for teams to use when you're not necessarily in the room, which is something that I'm kind of still working towards. So I hopefully very, very soon, I will have a full-time function that will do that and that alone, that will just plunge into just a black sea of user and customer intelligence, and emerge back with whatever, with surprises, with affirmations, with business opportunities, with market gaps that we're not aware of, or with areas that we are flourishing and doing doing marvelously and we have no idea. So I'm definitely looking forward to that.
Well, that sounds a plan. Yeah. Who wants to go next?
Alicia, you want to go?
Sure. So I get a lot of anxiety about like who's going to talk next. Let's see. So yeah, there's some things that I'm really personally excited about, but because basically I mentioned I got a degree in sustainability in travel and tourism last year in kind of my existential pandemic, what is life, like did this a certificate course through Cambridge on sustainable business leadership. And I've been really so happy that the team at Deliveroo have allowed me to like explore that on top of product marketing. So I've been able to partner with some of our teams at Deliveroo we're kind of like leading different functions of some sustainability initiatives that we'll be announcing coming up later on. Luckily not too far away. I don't think I'm going to get in trouble for saying that, but and I think another piece that I'm really excited about back on the product marketing land is for over a year, actually starting with an area review where I tried to get everyone's consensus before going into the meeting. I've been really trying to fight for satisfaction as a commercial metric and satisfaction as a comprehensive metric that leads to long-term success as well as happy customers. And one that should be weighted equally with profitability and incrementality and growth. And I think we're seeing a sea change now where really high up people in the business are believing that. And it takes probably like 1,000 versions of me, tons of different people across different functions to drive that kind of like paradigm shift. But we're moving that way. And so I've got an amazing team right now, and I'm really excited to like take a step back and focus on erasing everything that we've done in the past and just saying, what do we need to do to create the best experience for our partners, laddering up to this metric? And I think that's going to open up a lot more room for creativity and innovation. So that's probably my answer.
Nice.
Okay, I will go now. So yeah, similar to Jonathan, can't really talk about the specifics of any particular projects that we have going on, but I think the theme that I'm looking forward to for this year is, well, one, getting vaccinated so that, we can actually see one another in person. But from the product marketing lens, there's a lot of transformational opportunity ahead of us. Even at a company of LinkedIn's size, we have so much more to be done, and we have a lot of areas in which we can become even stronger. And I'm excited by the position that product marketing has to actually not just be a rider in the car that's making those changes, but actually help drive it. And I think there are a lot of different ways in which that can play out, not just on, the B2B side, but of course also the B2C side of our business and in general, the health of the marketplace. And I think that when you look at the trajectory of LinkedIn, sort of where it began, where it is today, and where it could go, it's just really an exciting time to be there, especially with, a very now not so recent change in leadership with Jeff stepping down and having Ryan, our new CEO, on board. We have a very broad vision. And I think that there are a number of ways in which our team and other teams across the org are structured to drive that forward. It will be a very different way of working, I think, to get there, which will be really interesting, especially I've got to imagine for people who've been at this company for longer than I have. But it's also exciting. I think you have ample room to grow when you sort of step into a territory that's less familiar. And you challenge yourself to grow, right? I think all of us on this panel are always looking for opportunities of how can I do this differently? What did I not take into account? If I had to do it again, what would I do? And sort of that continuous knowledge and development is what I'm looking forward to as we go into this next leg of our journey. So yeah, that is what I would say, Shreya. And I'm curious to know, since you asked us this question, what are you looking forward to?
Yeah, indeed. So when I started at Finturi, of course, more product marketing focused, etc. But lately, I have been also looking over at marketing as well as product marketing activities and kind of shaping the entire both the functions. So, and we are a scale up. So I'm really looking forward at how we can scale. So we're looking at, launching many more different campaigns to capture the market, many more different product marketing initiatives as well. And I'm really looking to see how that spans out and how much of the market can we really capture and, kind of contribute to the bottom line growth of the company as well. So I think as the company grows, I was fortunate enough to start from the first day the company started. So I really kind of am emotionally attached a bit, I think, so every time as the company grows, I think it also adds a lot of value to my, experience in my kitty in a way, because you learn new things and get to explore them. And I'm looking to explore many more of them in the coming year. And I'm also looking forward to taking vaccination and probably having like a nice vacation of, I don't know, a couple of weeks and in some very nice place, and just relaxing, which I haven't been able to do in the last 1 year. So really looking forward to it. Yeah, I think that's it for today, everyone. Thank you so much for watching us discuss tips and tricks and some interesting details about product marketing. And we hope you enjoy your day. And okay, bye-bye.
Welcome to Product Marketing Rendezvous. We're preparing to unleash yet another exciting presentation that's sure to set your pulse racing. But first, we want to thank you and our ensemble of speakers and participants for helping us bring this pioneering event to life. Without you, it'd be fantasy, a mere pipe dream. And remember, have your questions at the ready, because the speakers will be answering your questions and offering tailored support after their presentations. Leave your question in the comments below and get awesome advice from an expert in the field. It's really that simple. Let's resume the rendezvous.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to today's Fireside Chat. My name is Sean Broderick. I'm the product marketing lead at Upland Software. We have something pretty special lined up for you today. We're going to delve into the life of a product marketer at WhatsApp. And to help me do that, I'm delighted to be joined by Aneri Shah. Aneri, you're very welcome to the Product Marketing Rendezvous.
Thank you so much, Sean. Really excited to be here and to have this conversation.
Well, as this is on LinkedIn Live, drop questions, comments into the chat function. We'd love to engage with you there also during the chat. Aneri, tell us a little bit about yourself and your background.
Sure. So I'm a product marketing manager at WhatsApp, and I've been on the team for about a year working on new WhatsApp business products. I've been in product marketing my entire career. I started right out of college working at Microsoft on Office 365. I've worked at a couple of startups, and then most recently I've been at Facebook for about 4 years, 3 of which were working on the Facebook app, doing consumer product marketing for core products like Newsfeed and Stories. And then the last year has been at WhatsApp working on new business products.
I love that we've almost gotten to the stage in product marketing's maturity in general that we have people who have gone straight from university into a career in product marketing, almost like a lifelong career. I think that really speaks to the maturity of the discipline and what's happening as part of the Product Marketing Alliance as well, right?
Yeah, completely agree. I can't believe how nascent a field it is. And I feel very lucky that I've been able to spend my entire career in this field that, were I 10 to 15 years older, probably wouldn't have been an option for me.
It feels pretty good to get in on the ground floor. It is a day in the life of a preview.
Yeah, sure. So a typical day is a mix of meetings with the product team, preparing for new product launches, and often a lot of clients. There's inbound and outbound. So inbound, customer insight, implementation, et cetera. And then outbound is how we actually take products to market, and working on messaging and positioning, launch strategy, working with integrated marketing, et cetera. I am in the life cycle of a product. My day can lean heavier on either one of the two, but usually it's a mix of both.
Wow. And we're under the outbound side.
That's the part that I just get really excited about, working really closely with the product and engineering team to drive solutions and help shape the roadmap.
I'd sit on the other side of the fence from a launch point of view. That's where I feel most comfortable and get most excited about that part of my role. But it's nice to be able to have that spread of both focusing on the inbound product specific aspects and also the launch side of things as well.
Yeah, definitely. I love that the role is so varied and no day ever looks the same. And I think that's actually one of my favorite aspects of it.
B versus B2C perspective from a product marketing point of view. I know you have a C world from a Facebook perspective, but talk to me and a point of view, WhatsApp, the differences are between those two fields from a product marketing point of view.
Yeah, absolutely. I've had to be able to work across both B2B and B2C. I think with B2C, the role is much more similar to a CPG, people with CPG backgrounds. So I think that the line between product marketing a little bit more blurry on the consumer side, because any product that you work on, there is a high brand aspect to it. And that's really what helps drive the adoption. Really closely with marketing insights and making sure that you're getting your audience, because a consumer audience can be extremely broad, especially at, we did a lot of audience understanding work and understanding our messaging and making sure that we were able to create a product that consumer base. Whereas on the B2B side, I think PMM is a little bit more uniquely positioned to work in between the product and engineering orgs on product development, as well as the rest of the go-to-market orgs on sales, partnerships, business development, et cetera. And I think that product marketing can provide a really interesting business point of view and provide a lot of that market context that may not necessarily be evident to the development teams. Whereas on the consumer side, it might be a little bit easier to get a sense of that market context. So on the B2B side, I spend a lot of time understanding our partners, our clients, enterprise needs, doing a lot more benchmarking and working a lot more closely with sales and partnerships to make sure that we're landing the message well through those channels.
Let's delve into the first aspect you talked about there, which is B2C product marketing and those flyovers or overlaps that you have with the brand side of things. Talk to me a little bit about the analytics and the data-driven approach that you would have seen during your time as a B2C product marketer in Facebook.
Absolutely. So Facebook has, being data-driven is a big part of its culture. And so we're fortunate to be able to segment user behavior using a lot of different data and understand what are the key drivers of user behavior, what kind of user is going to find the most value in this product, how can we be the most successful? And so an example there that I worked on is I used to work on Facebook Stories. And our goal was, as Facebook Stories is a new product, how could we raise awareness of the product and make sure people understood what it was, what they were doing when they posted to stories, that stories were ephemeral and, the content you posted there would disappear, and making sure that was expected behavior for a user. And so we were able to use a lot of user signals, like whether they'd posted to stories before, if they'd viewed other stories, if they'd replied to other stories, and really just understanding how they engaged with the product to look at what kinds of marketing levers do we need to pull and what kind of messages do we need to send based on the user's maturity in the product lifecycle.
And that type of data-driven approach, I think, is an area that's becoming more and more prevalent in B2B product marketing as well, because like you say, you in the B2B side of things, you're normally looking at longer sales cycles, you're looking at fewer salespeople in general, and those interactions that you have can be a little bit more anecdotal, I think, at times. But really, when you get into that kind of mass market, couple of billion users, you really have to have your messaging tight from a data-driven perspective and not just that anecdotal piece. How well did that play out in Facebook, do you think?
Yeah, I think as B2B starts to evolve to become more like consumer, which is absolutely a trend that we're seeing across the industry, there's more and more opportunity to use some of the scaled marketing tactics from the consumer world in B2B. And I've seen that at places like Microsoft, where we were pretty mature with our lead nurture tactics and used a variety of inputs to make sure that we were able to send the right message based on the stage of the buyer journey or kind of consideration journey that a company was on.
So talk to me then about your transition into a role at WhatsApp from a B2B perspective. How have you found that? I know you've been there about a year now, and you're obviously getting a lot more comfortable in that space. How do you feel about that change that you've made in your career?
I feel very good about it. I think for me, as well as for a lot of other marketers, kind of picking if you need to stay on one side of the B2B or B2C line is a question that comes up often throughout our careers. And so I'm glad that I've been able to experience both and kind of build my hypotheses around what feels like a better fit for me and where I get more enjoyment, where I feel like I'm able to add more value. And I think that's been like a really helpful way to frame some of my career experience. And so currently I'm really enjoying the B2B world and seeing what that looks like when working on a new product. The products that we're working on at WhatsApp are very new business products. And I love, getting these products off the ground and working in the space of a very successful consumer app and looking at, how do we now change what has traditionally been a consumer space only and make sure that it caters well to businesses.
I think brand recognition is obviously not going to be an issue from a WhatsApp perspective. Everybody that's going to be listening in to this fireside chat today are going to have WhatsApp on their phone. How are you finding that move? You're obviously looking at the B2B side of things. What brands are doing really well on WhatsApp from a B2B perspective?
Yeah, so the WhatsApp business product that I work on is called the WhatsApp Business API. And it allows businesses to message consumers and manage kind of their communications with customers through WhatsApp. So there are two types of messages. We see business initiated messages, which are like notifications. So sending your monthly bill or sending a boarding pass if you're an airline, or some sort of transactional message that, maybe you would have sent via email or SMS, instead via WhatsApp, which is a channel that consumers are spending a ton of their time on. So that's the first type of message. And then the second type of message is a customer initiated message. So this is when the customer has an inquiry that they want support on. Instead of calling a call center and kind of getting stuck on holds for hours, they can do this via WhatsApp, and they can make the conversation a lot more interactive and have it on the go. So we've seen a lot of businesses have success with using our products. We've seen the most success in Latin America, where WhatsApp is really large, and businesses are really motivated to make sure that their customers are getting the most use out of the product. As well as in India, we've seen some really interesting use cases with education, where given COVID and schools being closed, we've seen companies conducting entire classes over WhatsApp, where they're effectively using chatbots to help teach students, make sure that they're getting their answers to a math problem correct and things like that. And that's just a use case that I love and feels so perfect for the time that we're in.
I think in any kind of community building aspect or company growth perspective, you have to go where your customers are. And I think from a business perspective, everybody's on WhatsApp. And I used to work in the telecom space. And one of the things that I was always continually amazed by was the amount of innovation that comes out of the Latin American market and the Asian market in particular. They're more innovative in a lot of ways than you will see in North America or in EMEA, for example. And I think that that's a classic example, like you gave there, hosting classes on WhatsApp in India is absolutely incredible. Any other companies that you would like to name check there from a case study perspective, I think, that are doing well on B2B for WhatsApp?
I think those are some great examples, but we have more case studies on our website.
The work of a product marketer from a case study perspective never really ends, does it?
Exactly.
How would you recommend personally then, from a business to business perspective, using WhatsApp alongside other communications or support channels? It's obviously one way that businesses can communicate with their customers. How do you think companies can integrate it into some of the other channels that they use to talk to their customers with?
Yeah, I think as companies are thinking through their multi-channel journey, think if WhatsApp is a fit for you and for where your customers are and which apps they tend to be primarily using. And then think of what use case makes sense to test on WhatsApp. Maybe start with one use case, whether that's sales or customer support or marketing. Figure out the use case that makes the most sense, and then start to scale accordingly based on the results that you see.
We talked a little bit in the intro about the fact that you've conducted your entire career as a marketer, as a product marketer straight out of college. What do you think, and can you outline the advantages that you think that gives to you in your product marketing career in general?
I feel very lucky to have spent my entire career in product marketing. I know it's not always an opportunity that's available to everyone. One of the key benefits for me was starting as part of a rotational program. So I started at Microsoft, where they have a program called ACE, which stands for Accelerating Career Experiences. And it's a 2-year rotational program where you spend a year on each team within Microsoft, and you can pick a couple of different teams. And it's really designed to provide you growth and get the kinds of connections and experiences that an introductory marketer needs. And so it's really a time meant for you to spend time really learning and getting the ropes of what are the various marketing functions, what do they do, where might my interests align. And so for anyone who is early in their career, I would really recommend finding a program like that allows you to focus on getting that learning and development. And I think often larger companies have more of these kinds of opportunities where they're able to afford you the purview to look across all of the functions and see, what is it that I enjoy most? Product marketing and marketing overall is a really broad field, and people have different interests. And I think being able to explore those interests early in your career is really helpful.
And I suspect being top of your class and being an excellent interview was probably some of the prerequisites to get into that Microsoft ACE program. Is that the case?
I think having a lot of demonstrated interest in marketing is really the key way to do it. For me, it was finding marketing related internships in college. It was being a brand ambassador for smaller companies who wanted to expand to college students, and just showing that I was really passionate about this field and wanted to take an opportunity. So I think anyone who's interested could definitely take the initiative to do this.
That's really good specific advice, I think, for people who are trying to get into programs like this, who are going to be massively oversubscribed. There's going to be thousands of people looking for a small amount of space. So differentiating yourself from your competition, from your graduate competition is fantastic advice. You've spent the last couple of years working for Facebook, WhatsApp, and Facebook companies. one of the things I think a lot of people are going to be interested in watching in today is, how do I get a job in a Facebook company? How can I move into an area where I could work on Instagram or Facebook or WhatsApp? What tips would you give job seekers and on how to get into a Facebook company, essentially?
Yeah, my number one tip is just apply online. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. Personally, I had applied to Facebook multiple times before actually landing at Facebook. And I think while it's easy to feel demotivated, you just need to find the right time where your background and the position are a good fit. But some other more tactical tips that I found really helpful. So one is the Facebook interview process. I was really surprised by how much of the Facebook interview process focused on being scrappy and having startup experience and wearing a lot of different hats. And I would have assumed that for a company the size of Facebook, large company enterprise experience would have been preferred. But Facebook really tries to retain the DNA of moving fast and having people take ownership. And so having worked at a startup was actually really helpful because I could talk about all of the different things that I had done and how I'd jumped in when a product designer on our team was out and, helped play that gap, how I had written all the copy for our product experiences on the website, done kind of all types of marketing when we only had a marketing team of 3. So even if you feel like your background might not be, in a company that's similar to Facebook, there are always skills and experiences from past roles that you can bring that Facebook will really appreciate. So that would be the first tip. And then the second tip would be to try and find a referral if you can. Referrals are mutually beneficial, where you get an easy way to have your resume seen within a certain amount of time. And for the person referring you, if you're hired, they get a bonus too. So definitely reach into your network and see if there's anyone you know who might be able to refer you. And that's the easiest way to get your resume seen.
I think that's in particular, Facebook looking for that type of people who are scrappy and willing to roll up their sleeves. That's one nugget of information. I think that when I started this conversation with you, I absolutely would not have thought that. I would have thought exactly like you, that they were looking for someone who has experience in large companies, navigating those complex structures that sit where you have hundreds and maybe even thousands of marketers across the industry. That's absolutely phenomenal to think that they're still looking for that person who has that startup gene in their DNA. And a fantastic piece of advice, I think, for anybody who's looking for a job in Facebook.
I'm glad. Yeah, I think that even though the organization is large and there are hundreds of marketers, every marketer has a pod of cross-functional partners that they work with. So like product design, engineering, research, legal, et cetera. And so being able to show that you've managed all those relationships in the past, you've been able to build influence with those partners, and you could work on a scrappy small team, even within a larger organization, is really important.
I always think of like product marketing as almost like two things. You're that almost central spoke in the wheel, whereby you have those integrations and interactions with all the areas you just listed there. But I also think there's that possibility for product marketers and I think product managers as well to become that type of organizational punching bag where there's something wrong with the product, where the messaging is maybe not right, there's an issue with it, it comes back to product marketing. How do you think how do you navigate those issues where you're getting feedback, maybe that the messaging is not right with the product, there are different aspects that are wrong? How do you deal with that type of feedback?
I think trying to make sure that you've tested the messaging as much as possible in advance is really helpful. Get feedback from a variety of different sources. So on the consumer side, we would do this through a lot of market research. We would do both quantitative and qualitative research to test our messaging. And so we could have kind of a bulletproof version of why does this work? Who have we tested it with? And like, how did this outperform others? And so that worked really well on the consumer side. On the business side, where maybe you have fewer people that you can talk to, it's talking to different types of customers, finding some beta partners, talking to your partner managers or your sales reps who have more experience landing these messages in the field, and seeing what resonates with different types and how do you make sure you incorporate all of their feedback into the final messaging. And I think that's really helpful for if you get feedback once the messaging is landed that it isn't going well, you at least have a case for how you have tested it in the past, but then continue to improve based on any other feedback and think about what is the right messaging for different segments, and how can you make sure that you have a tailored message for each segment?
I think that's one of the things that I would have taken away, that you would have assumed, and you absolutely do have that quantitative aspect to your message testing and your pre-go to market. But can we delve into a little bit the qualitative elements that you do and that type of research? Because I think everybody would assume that there's masses of message testing going on from a Facebook perspective. How do you bring that qualitative aspect to life?
Absolutely. So on the consumer side, we would do a lot of qualitative, whether these were one-on-ones, focus groups, intercepts where we flag someone on the street and show them a couple of statements and ask about their experience. And so it was really useful to get the depth of insight. I think with quantitative, you can get like message one outperforms message two, but not necessarily why. And I think getting the nuance around why does this message outperform? What are the assumptions that a person might have about your product in their head? What are the other things that they're comparing it to is really, really helpful. And trying to get that with a diverse audience makes it just even better.
I love that piece of advice there as well. Maybe something that not all product marketers are looking at the moment. I think, like you say, from a B2B point of view, you're going to have a more limited set of folks that you can actually talk to, but making sure that you actually do go out and talk to them and you make that time to talk to customers each week is really, really important. And I'm finding it myself, even from building out references and speaking to customers about their stories, is some of the most valuable time you're going to spend in the week. The to-do list is always going to be long from a product marketing perspective, but I think focusing on customers and staying close to the customer is really, really important.
I completely agree. And I would say that was honestly a mistake I made early in my career, where I didn't understand the value of customer calls or the participation of a PM on customer calls. I really thought that we could get the aggregated insights from the people leading the calls and then use those. But I think being on the calls yourselves, having the chance to ask questions, having the chance to build relationships with clients is actually really valuable and a key skill that PMM can flex.
I could totally agree. I think it's it's very easy when you're looking for the most efficient way of doing things to try and narrow it down to a data point on a spreadsheet, like you say. How are you navigating the lack of in-person customer events from a WhatsApp business perspective? Have you been able to shift to digital in the same way that everybody else has?
Yeah, interestingly, I started on the WhatsApp team after we'd already been in lockdown. And so I have not only never met customers in person, actually never met my team in person.
Wow.
Which is pretty crazy overall. But I think, in some ways it works out well. Previously, you might have had to travel to a customer location and kind of figure that out with scheduling and have a limited amount of time there and then have a flight to get to, et cetera. Whereas with this world of digital communication, it does make it a lot easier, where I know that I'm just a click away from being able to connect with any customers. And given that we work with such a global client base, that does actually make it easier and levels the playing field, and that we're able to talk to clients across the world as easily versus the ones who just happen to be physically closer to us.
Yeah, I think that's fantastic. I do have to say, though, I do miss the odd event where you could have in person. I think a Product Marketing Alliance in-person event at the back end of this year could be some fun if we get a little bit of normality back.
I completely agree. I was at the Product Marketing Summit 2 years ago and I loved it. And I loved meeting people in person and having the happy hour and things like that. So really hoping that we can return to some semblance of normalcy.
So as we think about that, and as we think about the rest of the year, what are your thoughts on 2021 and your core focus areas and goals for the year?
Ooh, that's a hard question. I would say that my core focus areas and goals are making sure that I'm able to continue collecting global input and making sure that I'm able to really to bring in insights from around the world and make sure that we're continually creating a global product. I think that's very important at WhatsApp, especially where so much of our market is outside of the US. And I think often if product marketers are centralized in one region of the world, it can be hard to really bring in those insights and make sure that there isn't a bias in your product reflecting the environment that's around you. So I think being able to do that is really key. And while we don't necessarily get the the business trips to experience the new market and the people on the ground, I think there are other ways to do it virtually to bridge that gap and make sure that you're able to get the global perspective.
That was kind of a curveball question, but you absolutely answered it and knocked it out of the park. I think, Larry, we've covered an awful lot of ground today. Thanks so much for taking the time to drop some knowledge on us on Facebook, on WhatsApp, Microsoft, on product marketing in general. Thanks for joining us.
Of course. Thank you so much for having me and for hosting this chat.
Thanks as well to the Product Marketing Alliance. My name is Sean Broderick. You can get me on LinkedIn, Sean_Broderick on Twitter. Big shout out to the marketing Twitter posse as well. Where can people get in touch with you, Henry?
Yeah, they can get in touch with me on LinkedIn. My LinkedIn is linkedin.com/in/Shaw.
Nice. Thanks very much. Take care, everybody.
Thank you. Bye.
All right.
Okay, cool. Just breathe through that.
Nice. That was great.
Good. Okay. Yeah, I think I hope it was some of the questions. I was like, "Woo, need to think on the spot here."
I know. I tried to flow it based on kind of what you were saying,
Totally.
and that can be kind of tricky as well, because you're deviating slightly from the questions, so you kind of have to think on your feet. But I think it works great, because and nobody is when people are watching these things, no one's expecting everybody to have the exact answer straight away. Otherwise, you could nearly record individual pieces and pull them all together. It's not really that kind of a back and forth chat. So
For sure.
that was really cool. And I think we were just about kind of 26, 27 minutes. So I think it should be just perfect. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. I think you were a great host. I loved the kind of the banter and the back and forth, and really, really appreciated that.
Thanks so much. I appreciate that too. It's definitely one of the more fun things I do. I love hosting and having a chat to people, and you always end up learning an absolute ton. So it's much easier to be asking the questions than it is to be answering them. So I appreciate it.
I don't know that I would agree with that. I think it's pretty hard to ask the questions too.
Yeah, I don't know. You get one or two out of the way, and it's like, yeah, this is much preferable to me having to think on my feet and answer really deep questions about product marketing.
Yeah.
Well, listen, I really appreciate it, and it was great getting to know you this week. And I guess we'll see you on the chat on the LinkedIn Live. And,
likewise. Yeah, that sounds good. I actually I told Rose this, but just for your context, I'm going to be on holiday the week of the actual event, and in just a different time zone and on the beach. So
nice.
So hopefully I am able to dial into the LinkedIn Live, but there's a chance that I'm not. And we discussed the idea of following up with the answers to people's questions in a blog post.
Sweet. Yeah, great.
But just wanted to make sure you were aware of that as well.
Nice. Well, I'll try and hold it down as best I can. Okay. All right. Well, listen, great talking to you, and have a great weekend.
Likewise, you too.
Bye.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Welcome back to Product Marketing Rendezvous. Having a great time so far? We can't say we're surprised. After all, it's an event quite like no other. The good news, we've plenty more magic up our sleeves that's guaranteed to blow you and your fellow PMMs off your feet. But before we serve up another slice of product marketing prowess, we want to take a moment to thank everyone who's played a part in making this event possible. Speakers, presenters, and of course you, the product marketing community. Remember, you can engage with speakers and their sessions by posting your question in the comment section or reaching them in our Slack community. Now sit back and above all, enjoy.
Hi everyone, I'm Elizabeth Burr. I'm currently the head of product marketing at Honey, and I'm excited to present to you all on the topic of So you launched a product, now what? I wanted to present on this topic because I felt like overall post-launch doesn't get a lot of love. People of all functions tend to be so focused on product launches, the initial release of your product, that they often overlook the next steps. I've done a lot of launches, and post-launch, you have a lot of questions about your role, the product, everything. It's a really pivotal moment, and hopefully this presentation will bring some focus to that. I also hope this presentation can serve as a tool for pulling up the post-launch thought process. So even if you haven't launched a product yet, having a better understanding of these issues that you will face post-launch will make your launch and post-launch period that much better. So to get started, I wanted to point out where exactly in the product lifecycle phase this presentation will be helpful. You've launched or introduced your product and are about to embark on the next phase of growth or normal state for your product. Things you've accomplished include, but are not limited to, releasing your product to the public for the first time or opening it up to a wider audience. You now have acquired customers. Congratulations. You've launched a marketing campaign to get these customers, and your product is being promoted for the first time or at a wider scale. Therefore, you have a marketing spend that you've started to accrue against, and you also have an overall financial plan that you're mapping against. A launch might be a day, a week, a few months. It depends on your business, but at some point, your acquisition efforts and your product are going to settle into a more regular mode. So launch is over, now what? You probably want to sleep, retire, find a new job, or launch a new product, but the truth is you're just getting to the fun part. Many have had successful launches, but it's what happens after the launch that I believe makes or breaks a product. So as that product introduction or launch period comes to an end, these are essentially the two main themes to look at in order to start off the next phase of your product marketing journey. Taking a look back at understanding your launch and prepping to keep moving forward. Breaking it down a level further, this presentation will focus on 4 key areas. In understanding your launch, it's first about checking your rearview mirror to better understand your initial KPIs from launch. And second, while it's important to understand the data, there are additional steps to take to truly understand who your customers are. So don't overlook that. Then in shifting to keep moving forward, this is about how to transition to an acquisition plus engagement model to make sure you aren't just bringing in users to a leaky bucket. And lastly, there are going to be a lot of things during launch and after that you identify that you'll need from your cross-functional teams in order to make marketing efficient. So here we go. First off, check your rearview mirror. There are lots of metrics to look at when you're launching a product, and different teams in your org are going to have different ones they focus on. For product marketers, what we tend to focus on can fall into 2 highly simplified buckets, quantity and quality. And I've outlined a few of the key metrics you'll likely want to focus on. Definitely not an all-inclusive, but hopefully help serve as a starting point. While the metrics you're looking at are important, how you're looking at them is just as important. So I wanted to outline a few steps to help evaluate these KPIs. First off, make sure you're checking your KPIs both during your launch period as well as immediately after. Making sure you're up on the trends of your launch are crucial to launching the next phase of your product cycle. It's also important to understand how to measure these KPIs. During launch, for example, are you looking at daily installs? But then post-launch, does it make sense to look at everything weekly or cumulatively given your forecasting? Consider different options. This can allow you to then go and look at the deltas between what actually happened during launch and what you forecasted. Identify where you're over or under, or just flat out seeing new or different things. Following that, you can match this data up against your hypotheses or questions you had going into launch. Make sure to also add new hypotheses or questions as you close these launch phase ones out. And lastly, and probably most important, align and prioritize what metrics you want to focus on, good or bad. Sure, everyone is probably going to say we need to work on everything, but you can figure out your own story to tell. For example, what I like about looking at your metrics as both quantity and quality focused is that you can weigh the ups and downs of both and ultimately determine where the real issues are that you need to address. All in all, it is important for product marketing to have a seat at the analytics table. Take ownership of certain KPIs, work through these steps, and ultimately your findings and actions can serve as a propulsion from new launch to existing long-standing product. Next up, know your customers. Really know them. So while data tells one part of the story, it remains important to check in on the other elements of your customer behavior. We never want to assume or take for granted that our acquisition efforts were 100% effective in only acquiring the types of users that we expected. So here I've tried to outline a bunch of different questions that you can ask to really start to understand who your customers are. Those who come in during your launch period are often referred to as your early adopters. They are, after all, those who first started using the product. And like I do with any audience, try to personify them. Making them human and relatable can help teams really feel like they're connecting with those using their product. If this audience turns out to be who you thought it would be, that's excellent. Now you need to understand the penetration you've had with that group and who the next target audiences are that you can think about expanding to. It's very rare that a product can exist entirely off of the adoption of one audience, so be prepared to target many. However, as can frequently happen, your early adopters look a little bit different than maybe what you expected. Spoiler alert, this could be okay. After you've personified this group or groups within your early audience, try and diagnose what could have caused that. This next question can certainly help with that. In addition to looking at your acquisition metrics, take it to another level and really understand the marketing channels that your new users are coming from. Depending on which marketing channels were successful for your launch, could have an impact on the types of customers you acquired. It's important within your channel strategy to define what success looks like for each one and your overall marketing mix. This can then allow you to explore where you can lean in more and where you want to go next. Lastly, work with your product team or user research team to really understand how your customers are using the product. I like to know where the highest levels of engagement are coming from, since that can help serve as additional or new value props to test in your marketing. But it's also important to know where you have some friction or drop-off points or different use cases in general. All of that information can help better inform you and your marketing strategies going forward. I also want to remind everyone that at the end of the day, we have living, breathing customers. The data can only tell us so much, and immediately following a launch, it's such an important time to do a real check-in with those using your product. If you can, conduct research, including quant and qual interviews with your customers. Also read your reviews and ratings and read them often. It's important not only to diagnose sentiment, but catch bugs and learn what users really think. Lastly, make sure that your existing customer base has a way to drive new users in. creating a viral or shareable element is the best free marketing that you can get. And it also serves as a metric to understand the quality of the existing user base that you have. Better customers tend to recommend more new customers. Let them do the work for you. With that, we can move on from understanding your launch, the data and customer experiences you've garnered through it, and talk about keep moving forward. And to kick that off, we'll start with don't try to fill a leaky bucket. So shifting over to keep moving forward. Launches typically can be a period of extreme acquisition growth and spend, but they can also be a time when you're slowly laddering into it. No matter how your launch acquisition efforts go, but especially if they are ramped up, you want to make sure that you have the proper mechanisms to keep your customers engaged and retained. It's a waste of money to bring users into your product only to lose them shortly after. That's the leaky bucket. While there's a lot that you can work directly with your product team on to also ensure retention and revenue mechanics are in place, I'll highlight 3 of the most important marketing initiatives that you can focus on: CRM, social, and loyalty. Before you start any of these programs, CRM, social, or loyalty, it's important that you understand the user journeys. How are different segments of customers experiencing your product? Make sure you actually draw it or map it out, because this is when you're going to figure out the second key element to establishing a user engagement model, which are identifying your communication touch points. By understanding your user behaviors, you'll understand when and where it's key to message them, to drive revenue, or to keep them retained. It's important to prioritize what messages and where, so that you're nudging your customer base along, not disrupting or spamming them. The wrong message at the wrong time can definitely have the least desired effect. We've all been hit with spammy feeling interstitials or push notifications. Properly outlining and understanding your user journey and all the touch points you have can help you create stronger messaging and avoid bad marketing pitfalls. Once you know how your users are interacting and where you can communicate to them, let's start putting together a CRM plan. This includes tactically how you reach them. Is this through push, email, within your existing product? And what are you going to say to them? Test this. Next up is making sure that you're also building a broader community through your social channels. Typically, CRM acts as a very one-way channel, but social communities allow room for discussion and different types of messaging. Make sure your product or your company, whichever makes the most sense, has a presence on the channels that feel authentic and resonate with your customer base. Social communities can do a lot to drive engagement for your product, even though it may not directly be tied to the everyday usage of your product. Lastly, where it makes sense, think about a loyalty program. Are there ways that you can reward customers for using your product? The smallest acknowledgement of even product anniversaries and daily usage can go a long way in keeping people as your customers. It can definitely seem daunting to think about all the different ways to interact with your customers, but even having the basics of these programs covered can go a long way in keeping your users from falling through the leaky bucket. Enter our last segment, make your demands known. In this section, I just wanted to acknowledge what often feels like the daily struggle of product marketing, which is making asks to all the cross-functional teams that we work with. Why I think this is important in this presentation is acknowledging the timing. Post-launch, you're just coming out of a critical period of the product life phase. Everyone is in a constant phase of learning, but it's also a pivotal time as you're kicking off the rest of the life of your product. For that reason, it should make for a good time to get additional resources. I wanted to call out the 4 areas that I typically see as having asks for immediately following a launch. The first is getting asks to the product team for their roadmap. Are there features that you need in the product to help with marketing, customer messaging, or things like virality? Now's your time to ask. Secondly, is potentially acknowledging the ask for new or additional marketing research. Presumably, you've done some prior to launching, but depending on what you've learned from your KPIs and customers, it might be time to dig in further. So now's your time to ask. Third is, of course, the inevitable budget discussion. Always important to have at a critical juncture of marketing, so now's your time to ask. And lastly, is the ask for any other additional resources. Do you need more headcount? Are there other tools that you and your team need? Now's your time to ask. So how do you make these asks known and effective? Of course, as we just discussed, timing is everything. And the timing cannot be better than these pivotal moments like post-launch. Additionally, though, having a well-informed ask will make your requests be seen as much more credible. Hopefully answering many of the questions outlined in this deck, you'll have the data and resources you need to back up your requests. Show how your asks will benefit these areas of growth or solve specific problems that have come up during launch. Show the upside. I've also found it helpful, especially in product-forward organizations, to make your marketing asks the asks of the entire product team. Show how, if you get what you need, it will benefit the entire org or take problems off their plate. Showing the broad benefit that you and your team can bring is always a win. And lastly, product launches can make you feel like the shiny new penny. There's a lot of attention on you and the team, good or bad, and your product is top of mind for many, especially at the exec level. As you wind down from this time period and potentially other products wind up to the launch phase, it's important to continue to keep your post-launch work on the radar of many. Well, maybe it's a weekly Slack update, a monthly email roundup. Take the extra couple of minutes every so often to keep others informed about the health and wealth of your product. And with that, I hope that I have provided some structure, helpful questions, or affirmation about life after a product launch. If you have any questions or want to discuss further, please let me know. Thanks.
Welcome, bienvenue, g'day, ni hao, hola. Wherever you are joining us from today, we want to say a huge welcome to our global community. We hope you are enjoying Product Marketing Rendezvous. And a special thank you to all our speakers and participants who together form our spectacular international lineup. Their sessions are bursting with insights to help the product marketing community level up. And remember, have your questions at the ready because the speakers will be answering your questions and offering tailored support after their presentations. Leave your question in the comments below and get awesome advice from an expert in the field. What's not to love about that? So now let's resume the rendezvous.
Hi, my name is Jasmine Wu, and I'm the Director of Product Marketing at ProofPoint, a leading cybersecurity software company that's been in the market for quite some time. Really appreciate everybody for being here today and tuning in. I thought it would be more interesting to dive a little bit more into storytelling as a product marketer because in my last over a decade of experience, product marketing is by far the most rewarding as well as most challenging career choices, and all of you have found it. So congratulations. And in 2020, the game has changed, in particular for product marketers who set out to tell a compelling story. Our audience, or what I would say our buyers, the right personas in the B2B and in the B2C space are consuming content differently. And that different model of consumption of content is here to stay. So that's why let's dive a little bit more into storytelling in our new paradigm. Before I jump in, a little bit about ProofPoint. We were founded in 2002. So in human terms, it would be that this is a 19-year-old company. It's 19 years old, going on to 20. So it's one of those more exciting periods of time as the company transitions into adulthood, which is why we're here today. More excitingly, in 2020, we crossed the $1 billion mark in revenue, and that's unparalleled by any cybersecurity company today. It does bring to light that where do we go from here? So I was brought in last year to think through some of the ways that we organize some of our products and how do we rationalize our portfolio to go through the next phase of growth for ProofPoint. Today, we're 22 plus products and solutions. So the question is, how do we, I've been tasked with solving or trying to uncover the question of how do we cut through the noise to get to $2 billion? And after having gone through 2020, this is how I'm thinking about it. If we look at this picture, I know I resonate with it. I don't know about everybody who's sitting in the audience. One thing I do know for sure, though, your CIOs are in these shoes of this woman, right? Sitting in her, what looks like to be her kid's bedroom, on a meeting, taking care of them and taking care of business at the same time. This is the pandemic-induced aftermath of the modern day workforce. And because their work styles have changed, so does that of the way that we tell our story so that they're able to hear us, right? I live this life now, as does, ProofPoint's cybersecurity CISOs, which is the security officers and IT and some of the other roles that we sell to, whom we sell to. And so I want to just share 3 important trends. There are not all the trends, but there's certain trends that I fully believe in. And that is, 1, attention spans have been reduced by 65% of all of your customers. And particularly speaking, all of your buyers, because of the exact scenario that I just shared with you earlier. And 2, buyers are more budget conscious because if you have not heard, there are many, many companies now going through budget cuts or budget conservation. So unless your B2B solution is solving for something big time, that's either removing a pain or helping generate an incrementally large amount of revenue, your buyers are not likely to step up the game and take your call or hear your story even. And three, even if you're getting that call for those buyers, seeing is believing. And so is word of mouth. And we'll dive into that a little bit later. So here are some of, in response to some of these trends, are also a few of the learnings that I've gained over the last few years, and in particular through last year, to build on solid storytelling for this new time frame that we're in history. And the first thing is be short and concise. Well, what does that mean? One, this might sound basic, but do enough research. As you're crafting your story, research is the intel that you're going to be putting into your story. It's the DNA. And when I say research, it's about researching your customer buyers, the people who influence them, as well as your competitors. There's no way to hack this one. You're just going to have to spend a lot of time and a lot of effort in trying to figure out what it is and who your customers are. Two is use a framework as you're going through and shortening up your storyline. The framework is a methodical way for you to solve for some of the questions that you have intrinsically. A good framework, there's many, many frameworks out there, but one good framework that we use at ProofPoint, what we call is key messaging document. And in that document, product marketing owns. And it contains what are the solutions that we're thinking about, but why does the solution exist? Who are the customers that we're selling to? What are their titles? Who are their influencers? What is our competitive differentiation specifically for these titles? What might they have today in terms of competition? And how do we rebuttal? How do we object to what they have today for either a displacement or a competing displacement or a new solution selling? So that's a framework that you can find templates online. And three, focus on the future. As you're telling the story, focus on what could be had. What could they have, and what is the experience that they will have? What is the benefit of the future and not the challenges of today? I know that contrary to a lot of different voices and a lot of people going through storytelling is they want to share the pain so that their customers understand that their product marketing or the company resonates with them or empathizes with them. Well, in a world now where there's a lot of information with a lot less time span to pay attention to, reiterating the challenges will sort of turn away the reaction of your buyer. But instead, if you focus on the future, they'll understand that you're solving for something that they want, and therefore indirectly showing them that you understand what they go through today. 4, when you're trying to put together a story that is short and concise, use emotion and if possible, be thought-provoking. In the journey of storytelling, being short and staying short and concise is one of the hardest exercises of the work of a product marketer. Everything else is a lot simpler. Okay, here are some examples. Slack. Slack is a B2B solution. It used to be, if you actually know Slack's DNA, they used to be a long time ago a gaming company that then diverted and pivoted into collaboration, or I should say a chat tool among people. It didn't always set out to be enterprise. And then it pivoted again, knowing that businesses and enterprises is where they're able to monetize. So they started monetizing off of enterprise. And now not only have they gone IPO, they've now also been acquired by Salesforce. So a good example of this is on their website. This is a digital channel. Slack is telling the story of who they are as an identity. Slack makes it downright pleasant to work together. Short, very short, less than 10 words. And they're trying to get their point across. It doesn't start with features. It doesn't start with capabilities. It starts with an emotion. Slack makes it downright pleasant to work together. And they even emphasize the emotion by saying downright pleasant. Now, it's an emotion to say pleasant. And then it's a thought-provoking idea to say downright pleasant. Because you might just be wondering, as a consumer of this, as a potential consumer, how good is it? How pleasant just is it when it's downright pleasant? Okay. All right. And then the second thing here that I'm learning over the last few years is engagement is king. When you're building your story, make sure that what you're putting out there is engaging the audience, which means that my first learning here on being short and concise means that you have to identify the right audience up front, and then you have to create content that is engaging for them. Okay, so the first thing is capture imagination, and by capturing imagination, in order to do that, you can be more creative. You might want to think outside of the box. You might want to go out of the office, or I should say in this case, go out of your home and find something that's interesting that will spark your creativity to tell a more compelling, imaginative story. 2, you're more than welcome and you're encouraged to use numbers for impact, because in the business world, for those who hold the budget, they are a walking calculator. So if you have numbers to prove it, it's more likely able to generate the impact that you want. 3 is bring in humor where possible. And in the engagement world, because the content is content, there's a lot out there. So in order to make it memorable, which would then make it engaging, make it something that is humorous. People usually, or something thought-provoking, kind of like thought-provoking. A good example of this would be, in ProofPoint's world, I'm sharing a presentation out to the global field, the global sales team tomorrow. And what I'm going to be sharing with them is a 2020 evaluation, right? A sort of a backdrop of the why by looking behind and looking backwards in time. So one of the things that I'm sharing with them is hindsight 2020. And I can say it's 2020 hindsight, or hindsight is 2020. And I say, oh, it's pun intended. So even though it might be not as interesting, it will get people to at least understand what I'm about to say following this sort of interesting or humorous commentary. Now, a couple examples of this in terms of engagement, in terms of imagination. A good example is Apple. From their website, they take one of their channels, which is digital, they talk about the power of Apple, and simply put, they say, we all have bought into how powerful Apple is, and then they say, oh, we will put that to work. So again, that's an emotional feeling, right? Because if we're just reading the words don't really say a lot, but because those words, literally speaking, don't say a lot, the meaning behind it is very powerful, because there's not very many people out there that haven't heard of Apple devices, and we can associate that with the power when that's all invested into our work lives. This is Tim Cook's multi-year plan to get into the enterprise. And so this is such a good example. And from an imagination and engagement perspective, they've built additional assets and content and storytelling by putting together this video to match the parallel impact of the web. Take a look at this.
Guys, I just got us a meeting with Vivian.
What? How?
I just bumped into her.
And what, you just asked for a meeting?
Yeah.
Is there anything I can do?
Actually,
When?
just now.
No, when's the meeting?
Oh, Thursday, 8 a.m.
Next Thursday.
Yes,
No, this Thursday.
What? That's impossible.
we can do this, okay? Round Box is back.
It's just a sketch. That's all we have.
2 days. We need
So I'll pause there. And from watching this video, there's probably not one person that isn't thought-provoked, that wasn't engaged, and it was triggered by the moment this woman walked into the office and flashback into her bump into her higher up. Right? It was probably her boss or an executive at her company where she's able to pitch an idea. And now you might say, well, actually, Jasmine, this particular storyline doesn't really have anything to do with Apple or what? And then I would say, well, wait a minute. What does Apple have to do with this storyline? Well, you start to imagine, right? As a buyer, as someone who's been sitting through all these meetings, you're probably starting to think, well, actually, this is probably pretty interesting. How does the, a team of people who are coming together to pitch an executive leveraging Apple and Apple devices in the workplace to get their work done in time, because they talked about, not having enough time to do the pitch. Or to finish what they needed to do in order to convince this audience. Okay. So this is a classic example again, where at the end of the day, it's not purely about the face value of the story, but it is about how you're engaging people, how you're capturing attention. All right. And then the third lesson here is empower your relationships. And what I mean by that is you as an organization, or even you as an individual or your team, right? You have all of the talent necessary to build a story, but how do you amplify that into the market? It is also part of storytelling. Storytelling is a journey. It's not I craft something on paper, I get it out to some of my channels and it's done. Because storytelling is almost like omni-channel marketing. In order to get the results that you want to get your story out there. And from my perspective, I see it 3 different ways in order to achieve the relationship aspect of storytelling. One is enabling your customers to tell your story. And one example of this is at ProofPoint. We're not the spotlight of our user conference. Okay, we have an annual user conference. It's called ProofPoint Protect. We don't speak there. Okay, my VP will come and tell me, Jasmine, we are not the spotlight. Our customers, go recruit them. Our existing customers will be able to share their experiences, and it may not even be about our product, but it's certainly about how our product have helped them. And as we go back to the very first slide that we went through here, at the very beginning of my presentation, seeing is believing, so is word of mouth. People don't just want to hear pitching all day long. That is a part of storytelling. It's not one story and finished, because it's a journey. So wherever possible, enlist your customers and enable them to tell your story in different channels or different environments. Another example of this for us, for ProofPoint, is this year we've started up an advisory board that equip our new customers, or I should say our prospects, along with some of our existing customers, and we really partner them. We buddy them up and we make sure that they can share experiences with one another on a particular topic. And this advisory board has hit it off really well, and where our prospects will come and tell me, hey, Jasmine, can I be in touch with such a so-and-so after advisory offline? And I say absolutely, because making sure that your prospects and your customers are engaged is a great way to tell your story through someone else, right? And then the second thing is new media. How do you empower your relationships to tell your story? Leverage new media and the press. They are your friends. And if you're in B2B, your PR and your AR teams should be your best friend as product marketers, because they have the channels and the reach to get to the media to tell the story that you've put together. So by all means, do it. Take your thought-provoking ideas and pitch them, and make sure that they can amplify it. And a big part of this is also demonstrated through launch. When you launch a new product, your PR teams, when you release PR, it's a great opportunity for the world to know about it, to talk about it, right? Number 3, enlist your executive teams, your CXOs, right? Let them represent the face of your company to tell that story. They are likely public already in many different ways, especially if you're at a public company. And it also gives you, as the product marketer, the visibility that you need to continue to hone in on your storytelling craft. Is that if you've got your CX teams telling the story that you're building, and you can even interview them. They've experienced some of the things that you're going through putting together a story, so they can oftentimes be a really good sounding board as well. Now, some examples of this in terms of leveraging your relationships with PR, media, your executive teams, and of the like. An example of this on your left side, you can see on the cover of Forbes is Jeff Weiner. Now, Jeff Weiner isn't even the founder of LinkedIn. He's a very successful American businessman who was brought in to run the company after Reid Hoffman and the team had founded LinkedIn. And their thought-provoking story is LinkedIn being the anti-Facebook. And that's what they really are. But you notice here, Facebook means something, right? It's short, it's concise. Facebook is already something that people know. You don't need to say too much about. But the anti-Facebook gets people to wonder, makes people curious. And so what this also shares with us is LinkedIn has quietly turned your resume into a cash machine. Now, is that actually true, or is that their story? Because really, those that turn your resume into a cash machine, those are your consultants, right? Your coaches and your consultants, your career coach and your career consultants. But in this case, Forbes is positioning LinkedIn as that money machine. It's not wrong, but they've claimed that story. Separately on the right, you can see here, Times Business Person of the Year, they have named the founder and CEO of Zoom Communications. Now, for those of you that have all been through 2020, Eric is the founder and CEO of Zoom. And this year, Zoom Communications as a SaaS business has gone up more than 300% in use, and actually even more. It's probably gone up. I don't have the actual numbers, but they've gone up so much, and they've essentially gone viral. Are they the only video conferencing solution out there? No, absolutely not. There's Cisco, there's Ring Central, there's Hangouts, there's Facebook. There's a lot of different video conferencing solutions out there. What has made Eric so successful and the Zoom as a company so successful is that they have crafted a compelling enough story, and then they've leveraged their relationships. So let's do a review of what that is, what they've done. Okay, Zoom has built the product. Then what they've done is, in their storytelling, they actually allow anybody and everybody to use their solution for free, as long as it's within a 40-minute limit. And they don't have to, there's no strings attached. You don't have to use a particular browser. You don't have to get consultants to come or professional services to come install. It's one click to use sort of a situation. And how unique is that situation? It's interesting, but it's probably not the most unique, right? 40-minute free video conferencing. Google, you can say, does the same thing. But Google is more complicated, right? Google's got an entire suite of solutions, just like Microsoft's got a whole suite of solutions. In order to get something installed, it's not simple. And Zoom is banking on simplicity and free usage. And then they pitch the press. What Eric had done is he had made sure that there are other customers out there that are telling his story. And if you go on their website, you actually see lots and lots of customer testimonials, which is fantastic. So having a story is not the end to storytelling. Having a solid, unique story, making sure that you can use methods that engage, and then leveraging your relationships is really going to tell your story successfully in a year of change. And that change is going to be here to stay. So digitize and make sure that you're ready to go for the future. And so in this respect, that is everything that I have to share today. I want to really also thank my team and thank ProofPoint and all of you who are tuning in, because really without the world of product marketers, what we are here to do as a single person or even as a single team will be much harder and much more challenging. So coming together as a product marketing community who's really able to bring the word, get the word out there is key and critical. So with that in mind, keep digitizing your stories and get ahead of the change that's already here in 2021. Thank you very much. I believe now is a good time to open up for questions.